Did you know that 90% of the people watching my videos are not subscribed? So, please subscribe if you're enjoying the stories. Also, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there. I checked into room 214 because I was too tired to keep driving, and that was the first mistake. At the time, I was 31, working as a delivery route planner for a medical supply company in Phoenix. It sounds boring because it was boring. Most of my job was staring at spreadsheets, fixing route delays, and calling drivers who were angry about traffic. That week, though, one of our regional partners in New Mexico had some inventory issues, so I got sent to Albuquerque for 2 days to help sort it out. The trip itself should have been nothing. Drive in, fix the problem, sleep, drive back. But anyone who has driven through the desert at night knows how strange it can feel after a while. The road turns into this black ribbon under your headlights. The sky gets too big. Every gas station feels like the last place on earth. I left Albuquerque late because the warehouse meeting ran long. I had planned to push through toward Arizona, but about 40 minutes outside the city, my eyes started burning. I kept catching myself drifting toward the shoulder, then jerking awake with my hands locked around the wheel. That was when I saw the sign. Vacancy. It buzzed in weak red letters above a low, L-shaped roadside motel with faded blue doors and a gravel parking lot. The place looked old, but not abandoned. A few cars were parked outside. One ice machine hummed near the office. A yellow porch light flickered over the entrance. I remember thinking, one cheap room, 6 hours of sleep, then I'm gone. The woman at the front desk was probably in her 60s, with silver hair pinned behind her ears and glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She barely looked at me when I walked in. Need a room? Just for the night, I said. She slid a form toward me. Cash or card? Card. When I handed it over, she stared at my driver's license for a little too long. You from Phoenix? Yeah. Her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Long drive. I gave a tired laugh. Feels longer tonight. She handed me a brass key attached to a plastic tag that said 214. That was the first red flag, though I didn't know it yet. A brass key. Not a card. Not a digital lock. The kind of key you'd expect to see in an old movie. I looked down at it and said, "You still use these?" The woman finally looked up. Her eyes were pale gray and flat. Some doors don't like new things. I thought she was joking. I smiled awkwardly, took the key, and walked back into the cold night. Room 214 was on the far end of the second floor, up a metal staircase that groaned under my weight. The walkway smelled like dust, cigarette smoke, and that sour cleaning chemical cheap motels always used to pretend things are sanitary. Inside, the room looked exactly how I expected. Beige wallpaper with tiny green flowers. A queen bed with a brown comforter. A boxy television on a wooden dresser. A framed photo above the bed showing a desert sunset. It was ugly, but it was fine. I dropped my bag, locked the door, and checked the bathroom. There was one thin towel, a little bar of soap, and a mirror with dark spots along the edges. I was too tired to care. I brushed my teeth, took off my shoes, and lay down in my jeans. The mattress sagged in the middle. Somewhere behind the wall, pipes knocked softly. Just before I fell asleep, I heard something from the room next door. A knock. Not on my door. On the wall. 3 soft taps. Tap. 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 I opened my eyes. For a few seconds, I just listened. Nothing followed. No voices. No TV. No footsteps. I told myself it was plumbing, or someone moving around. Old buildings make sounds. Then it came again. Tap. 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 This time slower. I sat up and stared at the wall beside the bed. My room was quiet except for the heater clicking under the window. "Hello," I said, immediately feeling stupid. No answer. I waited another minute, then lay back down. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the whisper of footsteps from the hallway made me freeze, every nerve screaming that I was not imagining this. They passed my door slowly, then stopped. I held my breath. The old brass knob didn't move. No one knocked. After maybe 10 seconds, The footsteps continued down the walkway and faded. I almost got up to look through the peephole, but I didn't. I was exhausted, and sometimes exhaustion makes everything feel sinister. At least, that's what I told myself. When I woke up, the room was different. Not dramatically. Not like furniture flying around or walls bleeding. Nothing like that. Just different enough to make my stomach tighten. The wallpaper was no longer beige with green flowers. It was yellow with thin vertical stripes. The comforter on the bed was blue instead of brown. The TV was newer, flat screen, mounted crookedly on the wall. At first, I thought I had dreamed the original room. I sat there blinking in the dim morning light, trying to force my memory into place. Had the comforter been blue? Had the TV been mounted? I got out of bed slowly and checked my bag. Still there. My shoes were by the chair. My phone was on the nightstand, charging. Then I saw the framed photo above the bed. The desert sunset was gone. Now it was a photo of a man standing in front of the motel office. He wore bell-bottom jeans and a brown leather jacket. His hair was long, his face serious, and one arm rested on the hood of an old red car. I stepped closer. At the bottom corner of the photo, someone had written in black marker, "Martin, 1978. I stared at it for a long time. Then I laughed, because what else was I supposed to do? I figured housekeeping had some strange habit of changing rooms around. Maybe I'd been so tired I missed the photo. Maybe the motel had different themed rooms, though that made no sense because I hadn't left the room. I showered quickly. When I turned the water on, rust-colored liquid sputtered out for half a second before clearing. At the front desk, the silver-haired woman was reading a magazine. "Morning," I said. She didn't answer. "Did someone come into my room last night?" That made her look up. "No, my room looks different." She blinked slowly. "Different how?" "The wallpaper, the bedspread, the picture on the wall." Her expression didn't change. "You tired?" "Yeah, but I'm not confused." She turned a page in her magazine. "These old rooms all look alike." I wanted to argue, but I heard how ridiculous I sounded. So I just asked for a coffee, which she said they didn't have, and left. My plan was to grab breakfast in Albuquerque and forget the whole thing. But when I got to the parking lot, my car wouldn't start. It clicked once and died. I tried again. Same thing. The motel had no mechanic, obviously. My phone barely had service. I walked around the lot holding it up like an idiot until I got one bar and called roadside assistance. They told me someone could come by in 3 or 4 hours. So I was stuck. I went back to room 214 and stood outside the door for a minute before opening it. The key turned with a heavy click. Inside, the room had changed again. My heart sank into my stomach as the door clicked shut behind me, and I realized I was completely alone. Someone was watching, and I had no way out. The yellow striped wallpaper was gone. Now the walls were covered in dark wood paneling. The bed was smaller. The dresser had brass handles. A rotary phone sat beside the lamp, even though there had definitely been no phone before, and the photo above the bed had changed. This time it showed a woman in a waitress uniform sitting on the edge of the same bed I was looking at. She had short curled hair, red lipstick, and tired eyes. Her smile looked forced. At the bottom, in the same black writing, "Elaine, 1986. I backed away from the photo. "Okay," I whispered. "Nope." I grabbed my bag and went straight back to the office. The woman was gone. The front desk was empty, the magazine lying open beside a half-full glass of water. Behind the counter was a wall of small mail slots, each holding a key. I scanned them and saw 214 empty. Then I noticed something else. A guest ledger. It was open on the counter, handwritten names filling the pages. I shouldn't have touched it, but I did. Most entries were normal. Names, dates, room numbers. But when I flipped backward, looking for room 214, I found Martin's name. Martin Keller. Room 214. October 12th, 1978. There was no checkout date. I flipped more pages. Elaine Mercer. Room 214. May 3rd, 1986. No checkout date. My hands started shaking. I kept going. There were more. Dozens. Thomas Reed, 1991. Linda Vale, 1998. Victor Hahn, 2004. Sarah Mills, 2011. Anthony Greer, 2019. All room 214. None of them checked out. The street looked ordinary, quiet, even comforting, but my gut told me something was off. I'd learned too late that danger often wears a friendly face. I took photos of the ledger with my phone, but when I checked my camera roll, the images were just black. Not blurry, not corrupted, completely black. Behind me, someone said, "You shouldn't look at things that aren't yours." I turned so fast I almost dropped my phone. The silver-haired woman stood in the doorway behind the counter. I hadn't heard her come in. "I want to leave," I said. "Then leave. My car won't start." "That happens. I need a phone." She nodded toward the rotary phone on the counter. "Use it." I picked it up. Dead. I slammed it down harder than I meant to. "It doesn't work." She watched me with those pale gray eyes. "Phones are unreliable out here." There was something in her voice then. Not threatening exactly. More like she was bored. Like she had watched this part happen many times. I stepped away from the desk. "Who are the people in the photos?" "Guests." "Where are they now?" Her face softened a little, and somehow that was worse. "Still here, in a way." I didn't ask what that meant. I walked out and headed down the road. There was no sidewalk, just gravel and desert brush. The motel sat behind me, small under the pale sky. I figured if I walked far enough, I'd get better service or flag someone down. After 10 minutes, I checked my phone. No service. After 20 minutes, I turned around. The motel was still right behind me. Not far in the distance. Not smaller. Right behind me. The red vacancy sign buzzed like I had only taken 5 steps from it. I stood there in the road, breathing hard, sweat cooling under my shirt. That was the moment my brain stopped trying to explain things. I ran back to the parking lot. My car was still there. I got in and tried the ignition again and again until the battery sounded weak. Nothing. Then I looked in the rearview mirror. Someone was sitting in the back seat. A man in a brown leather jacket. I screamed and threw myself out of the car, hitting my shoulder against the open door. But when I looked back inside, the seat was empty. Except there was something lying on the floor mat. A Polaroid. It showed me asleep in room 214. Taken from the foot of the bed. I don't remember walking back to the room. I only remember the key in my hand and the metal walkway under my feet. Room 214 looked different again. The walls were now pale blue. The bedspread had little pink roses on it. There were 2 suitcases in the corner that weren't mine. The photo above the bed showed a young man with dark circles under his eyes. He stood by the bathroom mirror, looking over his shoulder like someone had called his name. Anthony, 2019. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my hands trembling, as I fumbled for the keys. Every second felt stretched, like time itself was conspiring against me. Then I saw my own face, not in the mirror, in a new frame sitting on the dresser. It was empty a minute before. I swear it was. Now it held a photo of me standing in the motel parking lot beside my car. I looked pale and exhausted, still wearing the same wrinkled shirt. At the bottom, the black marker had already started writing. Not fully, just the first letter. D. My name is David. I dropped the frame. The glass cracked across my face. That's when the bathroom door creaked open. Slowly. A woman stood inside. Not a ghostly woman. Not transparent. She looked solid, real, and tired. She wore a faded waitress uniform. Her curled hair framed a face I had already seen in the photo. Elaine. She lifted one finger to her lips. "Don't sleep again," she whispered. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked past me toward the bed. "It finishes when you sleep." The room seemed to tilt. "What finishes?" Elaine's expression twisted with pity. "You." Behind her, in the spotted bathroom mirror, I saw other faces gathering. Martin. Anthony. A woman I didn't recognize. An older man with a bloody lip. A teenage girl holding a room key. Not ghosts. People. Or pieces of people. All watching me with the same hollow, exhausted look. Then the knocking started again. Tap, tap, tap. Only now it wasn't coming from the wall. It was coming from inside the photo frame on the dresser. Elaine grabbed my wrist. Her hand was cold but real. "Go to the office," she said. "Find the first book. Burn your name before it finishes." Then she looked at the door and flinched. The brass knob began to turn. I ran. I didn't wait to see who came in. I yanked the door open, bolted along the second-floor walkway, and nearly fell down the stairs. Behind me, doors opened one after another. Not slammed open, just clicked, calmly, like guests stepping out to see what the noise was. I reached the office and threw myself inside. The woman at the desk was waiting. She stood behind the counter with both hands folded, smiling faintly. "You're making it harder than it has to be, David." Hearing my name from her mouth made my knees weaken. "What is this place?" "A motel. What are you doing to people?" Her smile faded. "We don't do anything. The rooms remember. They get lonely. They borrow what they need." I backed toward the ledger. She moved faster than I expected, but she was old, and I was terrified. Terror does strange things to your body. I shoved the counter hard enough to knock the glass of water onto the floor. She slipped, not badly, but enough. I grabbed the ledger and flipped to the newest page. There it was. David Marlowe, room 214. The ink was still wet. The checkout line was blank. Beside my name, another word was slowly appearing, letter by letter. Replaque. I tore the page out. The woman screamed. Not in pain, in anger. For the first time, she sounded human. I grabbed the desk lighter sitting beside an ashtray and flicked it with shaking hands. Once, twice, nothing. The office door behind me opened. I didn't turn around. The lighter finally sparked. The paper caught. The second the flame touched my name, every light in the motel went out. The scream that followed did not come from one person. It came from every room at once. I ran through the dark with the burning page in my hand. The office door slammed behind me, and I heard footsteps chasing me over the gravel. Not fast, patient, like they knew I couldn't really get away. I reached my car and tried the door. Locked. My keys were in my hand, but I dropped them. Of course I dropped them. I fell to my knees, scraping my palms on the gravel, sobbing while I searched in the dark. Behind me, the silver-haired woman said, "You'll be tired soon." Her voice was close. Too close. My fingers closed around the keys. I unlocked the car, threw myself inside, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turned over immediately. I didn't look back until I was on the highway, speeding so hard the steering wheel shook. In the rearview mirror, the motel stood dark except for one red sign. Vacancy. Then it flickered out. I drove until sunrise. I stopped at a gas station outside Gallup and called the police. They were polite at first, then less polite when I couldn't tell them the motel's exact name. I had no receipt, no working photos, no charge on my card. When I tried to show them the cracked frame glass in my bag, it was gone. Only the brass key remained. Room 214. An officer drove me back later that day. There was no motel. Just an empty lot off the road, full of weeds and broken concrete. He said maybe I had the wrong place. Maybe I was exhausted. Maybe I dreamed more than I realized. I wanted to believe him. I really did. That was 6 years ago. I don't stay in roadside motels anymore. I don't sleep in rooms with old wallpaper. I check every photo on every wall when I travel. I take pictures of everything twice, then send them to someone immediately. Most people think I had some kind of stress episode. Maybe you do too. But last month, I got a package in the mail with no return address. Inside was a brass motel key. Not mine. This one said 215. And underneath it was a Polaroid of a room I had never seen before. Fresh wallpaper. Clean bed. A framed picture above the headboard. The picture showed me, older now, standing in the doorway, smiling like I had finally checked in. Story 2. I didn't tell anyone about the footprints at first because I knew how stupid it would sound. I was 29 then, living in Las Cruces, working freelance photography jobs that barely paid enough to justify the gas I burned chasing sunrise shots across New Mexico. Most of my work was boring. Engagement photos, senior portraits, real estate listings where the house looked bigger in pictures than it did in real life. But White Sands was different. If you've ever been there early in the morning, before the tourists show up and before the sun gets too harsh, you know what I mean. It doesn't feel like a park. It feels like the whole world has been erased and replaced with silence. Just endless white dunes, soft shadows, cold air, and that strange feeling that sound doesn't travel the same way out there. I had been trying to build a real portfolio, something moody and cinematic, something galleries might actually care about. Empty desert shots, dawn light, no footprints, no people, just clean sand and the sky turning blue. So I got a permit to camp near the backcountry area for 2 nights. That was the plan. 2 nights. I packed light. Tent, sleeping bag, camera gear, tripod, headlamp, water, some protein bars, my phone, a power bank. I told my older sister, Maribel, where I was going because she always worried about me doing solo shoots. "Text me when you set up," she said over the phone. "I'll be fine," I told her. "It's a national park, not Mars." "Still creepy. It's sand." "Exactly," she said. "Too much of it." I laughed then. I actually laughed. The first evening was normal. Beautiful even. The sky went pink and orange over the dunes, and the sand cooled fast once the sun dropped. I set my tent near a low cluster of yucca plants because it gave me at least some kind of landmark. Out there, everything starts looking the same after a while. Before bed, I walked a wide circle around the tent, partly to check the area, and partly because I wanted to see how far my own prints would show. They were obvious. Deep, clean, almost sharp in the powdery gypsum. That bothered me a little. I don't know why. Maybe because I realized anyone walking near my tent would leave a trail I couldn't miss. I zipped myself in around 10 p.m. The night was colder than I expected. Wind brushed the tent fabric softly, not hard enough to shake it, just enough to make it whisper. I remember lying there, staring up at the dark ceiling, listening to absolutely nothing. No cars, no voices, no city hum, just wind and my own breathing. At some point, I woke up because I thought I heard a footstep. Not a crunch, exactly. White Sands doesn't crunch like gravel. It's more of a soft press, a muted shift. I held my breath. There it was again. A slow step outside the tent. Then nothing. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the whisper of movement just beyond the fabric made me freeze, every nerve screaming that I was not imagining this. I reached for my headlamp, but my fingers felt clumsy in the cold. I clicked it on and aimed the beam at the tent wall. Nothing. Just nylon glowing pale yellow. "Hello," I called. My voice sounded weak, swallowed by the dunes. No answer. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, listening, heart thudding in my ears. Eventually, I convinced myself it had been wind pushing loose sand against the tent. Or a kit fox. Or some other desert animal I didn't know enough about. When sunrise came, I unzipped the tent and stepped out. That was when I saw the footprints. They circled my tent once. A full ring. Not close enough to touch the fabric, but close enough that whoever made them had stood within arm's reach of me while I slept. My stomach tightened. I looked around fast, expecting to see someone walking away across the dunes. But there was nothing. No person. No tent. No vehicle. No second trail leading in or out. Just the circle. That was the first thing that didn't make sense. The prints were there, clear as anything, but they didn't seem to come from anywhere. They just started beside my tent, went around it, and ended where they began. I took photos because that's what I do when I don't understand something. My hands shook as I adjusted the focus. Then I noticed the size. They looked about my size. Men's boots. Similar tread. I glanced down at my own hiking boots. Same general shape, but I told myself half the boots in New Mexico probably looked like that. I didn't compare them too closely. I didn't want to. I called Maribel after breakfast. "You're not staying another night," she said immediately. I didn't say anything happened. "You said there are footprints around your tent." I said weird footprints. Are there people nearby? I don't see anyone. That makes it worse, Mateo. I kept scanning the dunes while she talked, phone pressed to my ear, camera hanging from my neck. It could have been me, I said. She went quiet. What? I mean, maybe I woke up and walked around half asleep. Do you do that? No. Then why would you say that? Because the other option was worse. I didn't tell her that. I promised I'd be careful, then spent the morning shooting. The light was perfect, but I couldn't enjoy it. Every time I crouched behind the camera, I felt exposed. Like someone could be watching from behind a dune, close enough to see me, but hidden by the curves of sand. By afternoon, I had almost packed up. I really did. But then I started getting angry at myself. I had driven hours, paid for the permit, planned this shoot for weeks. One weird set of footprints wasn't enough to scare me home. That's what I told myself. That's how people talk themselves into staying where they shouldn't. That evening, I tried to be smart. I smoothed the sand around my tent with a collapsible shovel, making a clean surface so I'd know exactly what happened during the night. I placed my tripod facing the entrance, set the camera on time-lapse mode, and left my boots just inside the tent door. Then I took a sleeping pill. That was probably the dumbest thing I did. I had trouble sleeping when I camped, and I wanted to be rested for sunrise. It was just an over-the-counter pill, nothing dramatic. I'd used it before. I zipped the tent shut. The last thing I remember was the wind picking up and the tripod creaking faintly outside. When I opened my eyes, it was still dark. My mouth was dry. My head felt heavy, like I had been sleeping underwater. For a second, I didn't know where I was. Then I felt the cold. My sleeping bag was open. My socks were damp. And the tent door was unzipped. Just a few inches. My heart sank into my stomach as the flap moved softly in the wind, and I realized I was completely alone out there, or worse, I wasn't. I sat up too fast and hit my head on the tent pole. "Hello," I whispered. No answer. I grabbed my headlamp and crawled to the opening. My boots were not where I had left them. They were outside, standing side by side in the sand. I stared at them for a long moment, trying to make my brain accept what I was seeing. Then I saw the footprints. This time, they didn't just circle the tent. They spiraled, one ring around the tent, then another closer, then another so close that the prints almost brushed the fabric. Around and around, tightening like someone had paced for hours, slowly closing in on me. I crawled out, half panicked, breathing too fast. The footprints were mine. There was no denying it anymore. Same tread, same worn patch on the right heel. Same little cut across the left sole from when I stepped on glass months earlier. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my hands trembling, as I picked up one boot and pressed it beside the nearest print. Perfect match. I backed away from it like it might move. The street looked ordinary, quiet, even comforting in most scary stories. But out there was no street. No porch light. No neighbor's window. Just white dunes under moonlight, glowing like bones. My gut told me something was off. I'd learned too late that danger doesn't always wear a stranger's face. Sometimes it wears yours. I checked the camera. The battery was dead. Not low. Dead. I had charged it fully. I tried to open the footage on the small screen, but the camera froze twice before finally loading the time-lapse. The first few hours showed nothing except the tent moving in the wind. Then, sometime after midnight, the tent flap opened. Slowly, a figure crawled out. Me. I watched myself stand barefoot in the sand, swaying like I was drunk. My face was turned away from the camera, but it was my jacket, my hair, my body. I stepped into my boots without using my hands. Then I began walking around the tent, circle after circle. At first, I moved slowly, then faster. My arms hung at my sides. My head stayed tilted slightly toward the tent, like I was listening to someone inside. But I was inside. I should have been. The video skipped after that. Not cut. Skipped. Like the camera had glitched. When it came back, I was standing directly in front of it. My face filled the screen. My eyes were open. Wide open. But they didn't look awake. I leaned toward the lens, close enough that the image blurred and my mouth moved. No sound. Time-lapse didn't record sound. I watched it 3 times, trying to read my lips. It looked like I said, "Not yet." I shut the camera off. I packed in less than 10 minutes. I didn't fold anything properly. I shoved my sleeping bag into the pack, collapsed the tent badly, left one stake behind because my fingers couldn't get it out of the sand. The entire time, I felt like something in my own body was waiting for me to stop paying attention. The walk back to the parking area was worse than any part of the night. The dunes looked endless. Every ridge seemed familiar and wrong at the same time. I kept checking behind me. There were my footprints trailing back. Only mine. But every few minutes, I had this awful feeling that another set would appear beside them. When I finally saw the distant shape of the parking lot, I almost cried. A park ranger was near the restroom building, unlocking a maintenance gate. I must have looked insane because he stopped what he was doing and asked if I was okay. I told him about the footprints. Not all of it, just enough. He looked concerned, but not shocked in the way I wanted him to be. "People underestimate this place," he said. "The isolation gets to them. Dehydration, sleep deprivation, medication, all of that can mess with you." "I filmed myself," I said. That made him pause. I showed him the clip. He watched quietly, his expression tightening when my face appeared close to the lens. When it ended, he handed the camera back and said, "You should leave today." "I am, and you should see a doctor." I nodded, embarrassed and terrified at the same time. Before I drove out, he asked one more question. "Did you go near the old marker?" "What marker?" He looked past me toward the dunes. "There's an old survey marker out that way. Some campers wander toward it at night. We don't know why. It's not on the visitor maps anymore." I waited for him to explain. He didn't. I drove straight to Maribel's place instead of going home. She opened the door and immediately pulled me inside. For 2 days, I slept on her couch. No pills, no alcohol, no camping, nothing. I went to a clinic. They said it was probably stress, exhaustion, maybe a reaction to the sleep aid. The doctor used phrases like parasomnia episode and confusional arousal, which sounded comforting in the room, but meant nothing once I was alone. Because medical words don't explain everything. They don't explain why, 3 days later, when I finally unpacked my camera bag, I found something in the side pocket. A small plastic bag. Inside was white sand, and a rusted metal tag, about the size of a coin, stamped with a number I didn't recognize. There was also a folded piece of paper. It was one of my own business cards. On the back, written in my handwriting, were 4 words. "You walked too far." I haven't been back to White Sands since. I sold most of my camping gear. I stopped doing sunrise shoots alone. I sleep with a chair wedged under my bedroom door, which sounds ridiculous until you wake up once and find your shoes lined up neatly beside your bed, filled with sand you know you didn't bring home. That happened last month. I live in Albuquerque now, in an apartment on the 2nd floor. There's no desert outside my window, no dunes, no reason for white grains to appear on my floor. But sometimes around 3 a.m., I wake up standing in my hallway, barefoot, hand on the front door lock. And every time, I tell myself I'm awake now. Every time, I go back to bed. But in the morning, there are footprints in the dust by the door. Facing out. Story 3. I was 17 the night I heard the radio station. I know how that sounds. Like the beginning of some campfire story. Like something your uncle tells after 2 beers, leaning back in a folding chair saying, "This happened to a friend of mine," even though everyone knows it didn't. But this happened to me. It happened in New Mexico, on a stretch of road that doesn't look dangerous until you've been on it too long. That's the thing about the desert at night. It doesn't jump out at you. It doesn't scream. It just waits on both sides of the highway, flat and black and endless, with the mountains sitting far away like shadows someone forgot to erase. I was driving home from a friend's house in Las Cruces. My parents thought I was staying over. I wasn't supposed to be on the road. That's important. I had borrowed my dad's old Ford pickup, a faded blue thing with a cracked dash and a heater that only worked when it wanted to. The truck smelled like dust, motor oil, and the cinnamon gum he always kept in the cup holder. The kind of vehicle that made every mile feel older than it really was. It was a little after midnight when I left. My phone was at 8%. I didn't care. At 17, 8% feels like enough. I had music playing through one of those cheap Bluetooth adapters that plugged into the cigarette lighter. It kept buzzing with static every few minutes, but I was too tired to mess with it. I remember the glow from the dashboard. I remember the dry squeak of the steering wheel whenever I adjusted my grip. I remember thinking the road looked completely empty. No headlights behind me. None ahead. Just the thin yellow line running into the dark. I was maybe 40 minutes from home when the music cut out. At first, I thought my phone had died. I tapped the screen and saw the battery symbol flashing red. Then it went black in my hand. The truck filled with silence. Not peaceful silence. Road silence. The kind where you suddenly hear every little thing the vehicle is doing. Tires humming. Engine knocking softly. Wind slipping through the edge of the driver's side window. I reached over and turned the radio knob. Static. I twisted it slowly, trying to catch anything. Country station. Preacher station. Oldies. Anything to keep me awake. Static. Then, somewhere around the lower end of the dial, a voice came through. Clear. Too clear. A man's voice, smooth and cheerful, like one of those old radio hosts from black and white movies. "Well, good evening out there, travelers," he said. "You're listening to KRTC, coming to you live under a clean desert moon." I actually smiled. It sounded fake, like a vintage broadcast someone was replaying for fun. There was music under his voice. Soft brass. A slow little jingle. Then the music faded, and the host continued. "It's 12:43 here in the studio, and if you're driving north near mile marker 112, keep your eyes open. We've got a little trouble waiting just around the bend." I looked at the dashboard clock. 12:43. That made me sit up a little. I hadn't seen a mile marker in a while, but I was heading north. The host gave a light chuckle. "Nothing too serious yet. Just an old tire sitting in the right lane. Best to stay left, folks. Best to stay left." I stared through the windshield. The headlights reached maybe 30 yards ahead, then dissolved into darkness. I almost laughed again. Almost. Because about 15 seconds later, the road curved gently to the right. And there it was. A shredded tire in the right lane. Big, black, twisted rubber, lying exactly where my truck would have hit it if I'd stayed centered. I jerked the wheel left, not hard, just enough to miss it. The pickup swayed. My heart kicked once in my chest. Then the tire disappeared behind me. For a while, I didn't move. I just kept both hands on the wheel and listened. The radio crackled softly. Then the host said, "There we go. That's better." I turned the volume down. Not off. Down. I don't know why. Maybe because part of me still wanted to believe it was some weird coincidence. Maybe some local station had traffic reports. Maybe someone had called it in. But there was no one else on that road. No houses. No gas stations. No cell service. Just me, the truck, and that voice. The host went back to talking like nothing strange had happened. "Beautiful night across the basin," he said. "Temperature sitting nice and cool. Perfect night for a drive, if you've got somewhere to be. Or somewhere you're not supposed to be." I glanced at the radio. The little green line on the dial trembled. I told myself it was old equipment. Old truck. Bad signal. Maybe I'd misheard him. Then he played a song. It was old. Very old. A woman singing with a voice that sounded like it had been recorded through a wall. I didn't know the words. I only remember the feeling of it. Slow and sweet and lonely. After a minute, the song faded too early. The host came back. Quick note for our late-night listeners. If you're passing the dry wash after the next rise, watch for cattle. One of them has decided the middle of the highway is the best place for a midnight rest. My mouth went dry. I leaned forward. The truck climbed a shallow hill. At the top, the headlights fell over the road below. A cow stood across both lanes. Not walking. Not moving. Just standing there, pale and huge in the headlights, its eyes reflecting white. I hit the brakes. The truck fishtailed slightly, gravel popping under the tires at the shoulder. I stopped maybe 20 feet short. The cow turned its head and looked at me. For one ridiculous second, I whispered, "No way." The radio host laughed softly. "Easy now," he said. "No need to wake the whole county." I couldn't breathe right. The cow finally stepped off the road, slow and heavy, vanishing into the dark beyond the headlights. I sat there longer than I needed to. The engine idled. The radio hissed. I reached for the knob to turn it off. Before I touched it, the host said, "Don't do that." My hand froze. There was no music under his voice now. Just him. "Best to keep listening," he said. "Road's got a few more surprises tonight." I turned it off. The radio clicked. Silence. For 3 seconds, I felt brave. Then every light on the dashboard flickered. The headlights dimmed. The engine coughed once, hard enough to shake the cab. I slapped the radio knob back on. The station returned instantly. The host sighed, like a teacher disappointed in a student. Now, that wasn't smart. I drove. I don't remember deciding to drive. My foot just pressed the gas, and the truck rolled forward again. At that point, I wasn't thinking in full sentences. I was thinking in pieces. Get home. Keep driving. Don't stop. Don't listen too closely. But of course I listened. The next warning came 5 minutes later. Coming up on the left shoulder, the host said, "You'll see a man waving for help. Don't stop for him." My skin tightened. Ahead, the road stretched empty. Then I saw him. A figure standing at the edge of the headlights. A man in a light-colored shirt, one arm raised. He waved slowly. Not frantically. Slowly. Like he already knew I was going to pass. As I got closer, I saw more of him. Dark pants. Dusty shoes. Hair combed neatly to one side. He looked wrong for the place. Not injured. Not stranded. Just standing there in the middle of the night, smiling with his hand up. I kept driving. When the truck passed him, he turned his head and followed me with his eyes. I checked the rearview mirror. There was no one there. The radio crackled. "Good choice," the host said. That was when I started crying. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just tears spilling down my face while I kept my eyes on the road. I was 17, and I suddenly understood that being alone wasn't the same as being safe. The host let me cry for a minute. Then he said, "You're doing fine." I whispered, "Who are you?" The radio answered with soft static. Then the host said, "A friend." I almost drove off the road. His voice hadn't changed. It was still warm, polished, casual. But now it was speaking to me. Not to travelers. Not to listeners. To me. I swallowed hard. "What do you want?" The host paused. Then the old jingle played again. Bright horns. A cheerful little tune that made the whole thing worse. When it faded, he said, "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." I looked for a place to turn around. There wasn't one. The highway had narrowed, and the shoulders dropped into shallow ditches. The map in my head told me I should have reached the main junction by then, the one with the gas station and the billboard for fireworks. I hadn't seen it. I drove another mile, then another. Nothing. No junction. No lights. No signs except weather-beaten mile markers that seemed too far apart. The radio host started talking about ordinary things again. A missing dog in Alamogordo. A church bake sale. A dance at a high school gymnasium. But the dates were wrong. He said Friday, October 18th, 1963. At first, I thought it was part of the vintage theme. Then he gave the weather. He mentioned President Kennedy in the present tense. He talked about a new motel opening near Route 66. My hands were slick on the wheel. I told myself it was a rebroadcast. Some old archive. Someone's weird hobby station. But then he said, "And for those following the unfortunate story out of Sierra County, authorities are still searching for 17-year-old Daniel Mercer, last seen driving a blue Ford pickup late Thursday night." I stopped breathing. My name is Daniel Mercer. I don't remember slowing down. The truck drifted toward the center line. The host continued, calm and professional. Daniel was believed to be traveling alone. His vehicle has not been found. Police say there is no evidence of foul play, but the family remains hopeful. I slammed the brakes. The truck stopped in the middle of the road. Dust rolled past the windows like fog. My whole body was shaking. "No," I said. "No, no, no." The radio hummed. Then the host said, "You shouldn't stop here, Daniel." Hearing my name in that voice broke something in me. I threw the truck into park and grabbed the door handle. I don't know where I thought I was going. Into the desert, maybe. Away from the truck. Away from the radio. But the door wouldn't open. I pulled harder. The lock was up. The handle moved. But the door stayed shut, like it had been welded closed from the outside. I tried the passenger door. Same thing. The windows wouldn't roll down. The air inside the cab felt thin and hot. The host's voice softened. "Daniel, listen to me. Start the truck." I screamed at him. I don't even remember what I said. I cursed. I begged. I told him I had done everything he said. "I listened," I said. "I did what you told me." A long silence followed. Then he said, "I know." The dashboard clock flickered. 12:43. It had been 12:43 for nearly half an hour. That was when I noticed the smell. Cigarette smoke. Not from my dad. He didn't smoke. This was old smoke, stale and sour, like a room that had held too many people for too many years. The windshield began to fog around the edges. Not from temperature. From the outside. A shape moved beyond the headlights. Then another. People. Standing in the desert. At first, I saw only outlines. Men in narrow suits. Women in old dresses. A boy wearing a Letterman jacket. A little girl holding something against her chest. They stood just beyond the road, half lit, watching the truck. More appeared behind them. Dozens. Maybe more. None of them came closer. None of them waved. The radio host spoke very gently. "You see them now." I shook my head. "Who are they?" "Listeners," he said. The headlights buzzed. The people outside seemed to brighten for a second, and I saw their faces. They weren't monstrous. That would have been easier. They looked normal. Sad mostly. Tired. Like they had been waiting so long that even fear had worn out. The boy in the Letterman jacket lifted his hand and placed it against the windshield. I flinched backward. His palm didn't make a sound. It didn't leave a mark. But the glass frosted beneath it. The host said, "They all had somewhere to be too." I looked at the radio. "Are they dead?" The host didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Missing is the kinder word." The figures outside remained still. My tears had stopped by then. Not because I was calm. Because I was too scared for my body to keep doing anything extra. The radio crackled again, and when the host spoke, his tone had changed. It was still friendly, but there was something underneath now. Pressure. "Daniel, in about 1 mile, you're going to see a turnoff on your right. It won't be marked. You're going to take it." I whispered, "No." "Yes." "I'm not taking it." The host sighed. "Then you'll stay here." The engine shut off. The headlights went out. The world vanished. I have never known darkness like that. Not bedroom darkness. Not power outage darkness. Desert darkness. The kind that presses against your eyes until you start imagining shapes just to give your brain something to hold on to. Then came the tapping. All around the truck. Soft fingertips on glass. On metal. On the roof. Not frantic. Patient. Tap. 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 I curled into myself and covered my ears, but I could still hear the radio. Even with the engine off. Even with the dashboard dead. The host whispered through the speakers. 1 mile, Daniel." The headlights snapped back on. The engine turned over by itself. The truck was in drive. My foot was on the brake, though I didn't remember putting it there. The road ahead was empty again. No people. No fog. Just highway. I don't know why I didn't crash the truck on purpose. I've asked myself that a lot. Maybe I was too afraid of what would happen if I did. Maybe some part of me still believed there was a way out if I kept playing along. So I drove. 1 mile. Almost exactly. The turnoff appeared on the right. A dirt road, narrow and pale under the moonlight. There was no sign. No fence. Nothing that should have made it noticeable. The radio host said, "That's it." I kept going straight. For half a second, I felt the smallest spark of victory. Then the steering wheel turned by itself. Not violently, casually, like someone had leaned over and guided it with one hand. The truck left the pavement and rolled onto the dirt road. Dust rose behind me. I fought the wheel, but it barely moved. The host began playing music again. That same woman's voice. Slow, sweet, lonely. The dirt road stretched ahead through low brush and sand. The headlights bounced over rocks. The truck rattled, so hard my teeth clicked together. After a minute, I saw something in the distance. A tower, a radio tower, thin and black against the stars, with a little red light blinking at the top. Beside it sat a small building. One story, flat roof, windows dark. A sign hung crooked over the door. KRTC. The truck stopped on its own. The engine died. The radio host said, "We're here." I didn't move. The building looked abandoned, but not ruined. That was somehow worse. The windows weren't broken. The door wasn't hanging open. It looked maintained, waiting. The red tower light blinked. On, off, on, off. The passenger door unlocked with a loud click. Then the driver's door. The host said, "Come inside, Daniel." I stayed where I was. The radio gave a burst of static so loud I cried out. When it cleared, the host's voice was closer. Not louder. Closer. "Come inside, or they come out." I looked at the windshield. The figures had returned. They stood around the truck in a wide circle. The boy in the Letterman jacket. The woman in the dress. The little girl. The man I'd passed on the shoulder. All of them staring. I opened the door. The desert air hit me cold. My legs barely held me as I stepped out. The dirt crunched under my shoes. That sound is still in my head sometimes. That small, ordinary crunch. Like the world hadn't become impossible. The building door opened before I reached it. Inside was a narrow lobby with wood-paneled walls and a dusty floor. Old posters hung crookedly behind glass. A calendar on the wall read October 1963. The air smelled like hot wires and cigarettes. At the end of the hall was a red light above a door. On air. It glowed steadily. I knew the host was behind that door. I also knew somehow that if I opened it, I would never leave. So I did the only thing I could think to do. I ran. Not back to the truck. Not down the road. I ran behind the building, toward the base of the radio tower. The host's voice boomed from speakers I couldn't see. "Daniel." I kept running. The tower rose above me, humming. There was a metal utility box at its base, half open, with wires feeding into the ground. I didn't know what I was doing. I only knew the tower mattered. The broadcast mattered. I grabbed the wires and pulled. Pain shot up my arms, sharp and hot. The red light at the top of the tower flickered. The host screamed. Not in fear. In anger. The sound came from everywhere. From the building. From the truck. From the ground under my feet. The figures in the desert all turned toward me at once. I pulled again. Something snapped. The tower light went out. For 1 second, everything was silent. Then I was back on the highway. The truck was moving 60 miles an hour. My hands were on the wheel. Morning light sat pale and gray over the desert. The radio was off. The dashboard clock read 6:12. My phone was on the passenger seat, fully dead. I slammed the brakes and pulled onto the shoulder. Behind me, there was no dirt road. No tower. No building. Only desert. I sat there until a state trooper found me. He said I looked like I hadn't slept in a week. I told him I got lost. That was all. What else could I say? When I got home, my parents were furious at first. Then my mom saw my face and stopped yelling. My dad checked the truck and found dust packed under the frame, the kind you'd get from driving miles off-road. But there was no damage, no proof, except one thing. The radio didn't work anymore. Not AM, not FM, nothing, just static. For years, I tried to forget it. I grew up, moved away, sold the truck after my dad passed. I stopped driving empty highways at night. I stopped listening to radio stations that faded in and out. But I never stopped searching. I looked up missing persons cases from New Mexico in 1963. There was no Daniel Mercer. Not back then, but there were others. A 19-year-old girl who vanished after leaving a diner outside Truth or Consequences. A salesman whose car was found abandoned near a dry wash. A high school athlete last seen driving home after a dance. A family of 3 who disappeared on a road trip and were never found. The dates were scattered across years, not just 1963. But the stories all had one detail in common. The radios in their cars were broken when the vehicles were recovered. If the vehicles were recovered at all. I thought I had escaped. For a long time, I really believed that. Then last week, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a reel-to-reel tape. Old. Dusty. Labeled in faded pencil. KRTC, Late Night Road Report, October 18th, 1963. I don't own anything that can play a tape like that. I was going to throw it away. I should have thrown it away. Instead, I took it to a little audio restoration shop run by an older man who still works with old equipment. I told him I found it in my dad's things. I asked if he could transfer it to a digital file. He called me the next morning. His voice sounded strange. He said, "Where did you get this?" I told him again. "My dad's things." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You're on it." I drove to the shop in the middle of the day. I made sure it was daylight. The old man played the file for me on his computer speakers. For the first few minutes, it was exactly what I remembered. The jingle, the cheerful host, the warnings, the tire, the cow, the man on the shoulder. Then came the part where he reported my disappearance. I heard my name, 17-year-old Daniel Mercer. Blue Ford pickup, last seen driving alone late Thursday night. My hands went numb. Then the recording continued past the point where I remembered the tower going dark. There was static, a long stretch of it. Then the host came back. His voice was quieter, rougher, but unmistakably him. "Well, folks," he said, "that was a close one." A soft laugh. Some of them fight harder than others. More static. Then he said something that made the man in the shop step away from the desk. He said, "But don't worry. Roads have a way of bringing people back." The tape hissed. The host took a slow breath. "And Daniel, if you're hearing this now," the recording crackled. Then his voice became perfectly clear. "You still know the way." The file ended. Neither of us spoke. The old man deleted the transfer without me asking. He handed me the tape and told me not to come back. I don't blame him. I burned the tape that night in a metal trash can behind my house. It took longer to burn than it should have. The plastic curled. The ribbon blackened. Smoke rose into the dark. And from somewhere far away, maybe from a neighbor's garage, maybe from a passing car, maybe from the air itself, I heard music. Soft brass. A cheerful little jingle. Then a man's voice, smooth and warm, floating through the night. "Well, good evening out there, travelers." I went inside and locked every door. Since then, my car radio turns on by itself sometimes. Only for a second. Only static. But last night, while I was parked in my driveway, I heard the host again. He didn't give a warning. He didn't mention an accident. He only said my name, very softly, like he was smiling. "Daniel." Then, after a pause, "Ready for another drive?" Story 4. I never believed in haunted places. Not really. I believed in places that felt wrong because people had done wrong things there. Old houses with boarded windows. Empty schools with desks still arranged like the children had only stepped out for recess. Motels where the carpet smelled like cigarettes and old rain. But ghosts? No. I thought people invented ghosts because guilt needed somewhere to live. That was before the church. This happened 3 summers ago, during a road trip through the desert with 4 people I used to call my closest friends. Their names were Mara, Diego, Sophia, and Grant. I say used to, because I do not speak to any of them anymore. Not because we fought. Not because life pulled us apart. Because after that day, none of us could look at each other without hearing what the church had whispered. We had been driving through southern New Mexico, taking the kind of trip people take when they are trying to pretend their lives are still simple. We were all in our mid-20s, old enough to have real problems, young enough to believe distance could fix them. Mara had just ended an engagement. Diego had quit his job without telling his parents. Sofia was supposed to start nursing school in the fall, though she kept changing the subject whenever anyone mentioned it. Grant had inherited some money from his grandfather and acted like that made him the leader of everything. And me? I was there because I did not want to be alone. That was the reason I gave everyone. It was not the real reason. We had rented a dusty white SUV and spent 3 days moving between motels, gas stations, desert overlooks, and half-dead towns where every building looked sunburned and tired. Grant had this old guidebook he bought from a thrift store in Tucson. It was one of those local history books written by someone's retired uncle, full of grainy photos and legends about mining camps, abandoned missions, and ghost towns. On the 4th morning, he found the church. We were eating gas station breakfast in the parking lot of a place called Loma Seco. I remember that because the sign above the store was missing 2 letters, so it just said LOASEO in cracked blue paint. Grant was sitting on the hood of the SUV, flipping through the guidebook with his sunglasses pushed into his hair. "Listen to this," he said. Nobody listened at first. Mara was trying to clean melted lip balm out of her purse. Diego was filming ants fighting over a crumb near the tire. Sofia was checking her phone, even though we had no service. Grant cleared his throat and read louder. San Esteban del Silencio, a Spanish-style desert chapel believed to have been built in the late 1800s near the settlement of Santa Carina. Abandoned after the town's population disappeared over a period of 12 years. Mara looked up. Disappeared how? Grant grinned. That's the fun part. It doesn't say. I remember laughing. That stupid, easy laugh you do when something sounds creepy in daylight. He kept reading. According to local accounts, travelers occasionally reported seeing the chapel intact despite official maps marking it as destroyed. Several descriptions mention clean floors, fresh candles, and bells heard in windless weather. Diego lowered his phone. Fresh candles in an abandoned church? That's either ghosts or squatters. Or teenagers, Sofia said. Grant tapped the page. There's a dirt road. It's like 40 minutes from here. Mara immediately said no. Not scared. Just tired. We are not driving 40 minutes into nowhere to look at a church full of spiders. Grant turned the book toward us. The photo was old and blurry, but I could make out white plaster walls, a small bell tower, and a wooden door beneath a rounded arch. The building looked sunken into the desert, like the sand was slowly trying to swallow it. It's perfect, he said. 1 hour. We go take photos, scare ourselves, leave. Diego shrugged. I'm in. Sofia hesitated, then nodded. Mara looked at me. I should have said no. That is the part one still think about. A life can split in half because one person does not want to seem boring. So I said, yeah, why not? The road to Santa Carina was barely a road. At first, it was gravel. Then it became packed dirt. Then it became 2 pale tire tracks cutting through desert scrub and red dust. The SUV rattled so hard the dashboard sounded loose. Heat shimmered over the ground. Mountains sat far away in every direction, blue and unreal, like painted scenery. The guidebook said Santa Carina had once been a small mining town. Silver, probably. Maybe copper. There was not much left when we arrived. Just a few low stone foundations. A roofless building with one wall still standing. Rusted metal scraps half buried in sand. A wooden post with no sign attached. The place felt less abandoned than erased. Grant parked near the remains of what might have been a general store. We got out, stretched, and looked around. No church. Great, Mara said. Historic pile of rocks. Worth it. Grant frowned at the guidebook, then at the horizon. It should be west of the main street. There is no main street, Sofia said. He pointed past the ruined foundations. That way. We walked. At first, nothing changed. Same dust. Same brittle plants. Same bright white sky pressing down on us. Then the air cooled. Not a lot. Just enough that I noticed it. The sunlight seemed thinner somehow. The wind stopped moving. The desert went quiet in a way I had never heard before. Not peaceful quiet, not natural quiet, listening quiet. Diego noticed it too. "Do you guys hear that?" Mara turned. "Hear what?" He lifted one finger. We stood still, and from somewhere ahead of us, very faintly, came the sound of a bell. One note, low, soft, then gone. Nobody spoke for a moment. Grant smiled, but it looked forced. "Okay," he said. "That was cool." We kept walking. The church appeared slowly. That is the only way I can describe it. 1 second there was only heat and dust ahead of us. Then there was a pale shape near a rise in the ground. Then walls. Then a bell tower. Then a wooden cross leaning over the roof. It did not feel like we had found it. It felt like it had decided to be seen. San Esteban del Silencio stood alone in the desert, cleaner than it had any right to be. The white plaster was cracked but not crumbling. The roof tiles were sun-faded but still in place. The wooden doors were old, dark, and carved with little symbols I could not read. There were no footprints leading up to it. Not ours. Not anyone's. The sand around the entrance was smooth. Mara whispered, "Nope." But she did not turn back. None of us did. Grant walked first, of course. He always did when he wanted to prove something. He pushed the door. It opened without a sound. Inside, the church was cool. That was the first impossible thing. Outside, the desert was baking. Inside, the air felt like evening. It smelled faintly of candle wax, dust, and something floral like old perfume. Rows of wooden pews faced a small altar. The walls were plain white plaster, with faded religious paintings hung between narrow windows. The floor was clean. Not just less dusty than expected. Clean. No animal droppings. No leaves. No footprints. At the front, on both sides of the altar, candles were burning. Fresh candles. Tall cream-colored ones, their flames steady and bright. Diego muttered, "Someone's been here." His voice sounded wrong in that room. Too loud and too soft at the same time. Grant walked toward the altar, filming on his phone. "Hello," he called. "Anyone here?" The word returned to us from the walls. "Here, here, here." Mara stayed near the door with her arms folded. Sophia stepped slowly down the aisle, looking around like she expected someone to step out from behind a column. I noticed the confession booth last. It sat against the left wall near the back. Dark wood, narrow, old-fashioned. One side for the priest, one for the person confessing. A curtain hung over the little screen between them. It should not have bothered me, but the booth looked warmer than the rest of the room. I know that sounds strange. Wood cannot look warm. But that booth did. As if someone had been sitting inside it for hours. As if a body had recently left. Sophia saw me staring. "What?" I nodded toward it. She looked, then immediately looked away. "No thanks." Grant came back down the aisle. "You scared of a confession booth?" Sophia snapped, "No." "Then go in." "Grant," Mara said. "Don't." He grinned. That was Grant. Push until someone flinched. Then call it a joke. It's just a booth. Sophia shook her head. Diego said, "You go in." Grant laughed. "Fine." He pulled open the right side door and stepped inside. The wood creaked under his weight. He sat down and shut the door behind him. For a second, nothing happened. Then he said from inside, "It's warm in here." The rest of us looked at each other. I remember Mara whispering, "Stop messing around." "I'm not." His voice had changed. It was quieter. The curtain inside the booth shifted, though there was no wind. Grant went silent. "Grant," Diego said. No answer. Then the booth knocked once. From the inside. Hard. Mara moved toward it, but the door opened before she reached him. Grant stepped out. His face had gone pale beneath his tan. "What happened?" I asked. He did not answer. He walked past all of us, down the aisle, out the church doors, and into the sunlight. Mara followed him. We all did. Outside, Grant stood with both hands on the hood of the SUV, breathing through his mouth. "Dude," Diego said. "What did you hear?" Grant looked at him sharply. "Nothing. That didn't look like nothing." I said nothing. Mara's voice softened. Grant. He turned on her. Drop it. And because we were all used to Grant being unpleasant when cornered, we did. But I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. Not fear of the church. Fear of us. We should have left then. That was the second chance. Maybe the last real one. But curiosity is a terrible thing when it has a group to hide inside. Diego said he wanted to see what Grant heard. Mara called him an idiot. Sophia said absolutely not. Grant told us to do whatever we wanted because he was not going back inside. So Diego went in. He made a show of it at first. He bowed before entering the booth, crossed himself badly, whispered, "Forgive me, Father, for I have content to create." Nobody laughed. The door shut. The church held its breath. We stood near the back, close enough to hear Diego shifting inside. Then he said, "Hello." A pause. Then very quietly he said, "Who's there?" The curtain inside the booth moved. Diego stopped breathing loudly. His voice came again, but smaller. "How do you know that?" Mara whispered, "Diego?" He slammed the booth door open and stumbled out. His face was wet with sweat. He looked straight at Sophia. "You told someone?" Sophia stepped back. "Told someone what?" "You had to. Nobody else knew." "I don't know what you're talking about." Diego laughed once. It was a horrible sound. "Right. Sure." He walked out too. Now there were two of them outside. Grant near the SUV. Diego pacing beside the ruins of Santa Carina, kicking dust like he wanted to bury something. Sophia started shaking her head. "No. I hate this." Mara looked at me. "We're leaving." "Yes," I said. But before we could move, the church bell rang again. Not faintly this time. Loud. Directly above us. The sound dropped through the building and into my bones. Sophia clapped her hands over her ears. The candles at the altar flickered. All of them leaned toward the confession booth. Not away from wind. Toward it. Mara whispered, "What is this place?" No one answered. Because by then, I think we all understood something had been wrong from the moment we saw the church. Something was not haunting it. Something was using it. Sophia backed toward the door, but she stopped. Her face had gone blank. "Sophia?" I said. She did not look at me. She was staring at the booth. The right side door had opened by itself. Just a little. Enough to invite her. "Sophia," Mara said firmly. "Do not." Sophia's lips parted. "I think it wants me." "Then don't give it what it wants," I said. But she was already walking. Mara grabbed her wrist. Sophia pulled free. Not violently. Calmly. That made it worse. She stepped into the booth and closed the door. Mara cursed under her breath and pressed her forehead against the wood. "Sophia, come out." Inside, Sophia whispered something we could not hear. Then another voice answered. It came from the priest's side of the booth. A thin, dry whisper. Too soft to understand, but close enough that we knew it was not Sophia. Mara froze. I reached for the priest's side door. It would not open. I pulled harder. Nothing. From inside the booth, Sophia started crying. Not loudly. Just small, embarrassed breaths, like someone trying not to break down in public. The whisper continued. Mara shouted, "Leave her alone." The candles went out. Every single one. The church fell into dim blue shadow. And in the dark, the whisper became clear. It said, "You let her take the blame." Sophia gasped. Mara stepped away from the booth. "What?" The whisper said it again. "You let her take the blame." Then Sophia screamed, not in pain, but in panic, and threw the door open. She came out with both hands pressed to her mouth. Mara reached for her, but Sophia shoved past her and ran outside. Now it was just Mara and me in the church. And the booth. And the dark altar. I did not want to know anymore. I did not want explanations. I wanted to get in the car, drive until we hit pavement, and never speak about it again. But Mara was staring at the booth. Her face had changed. All her anger had drained away. She looked tired. The kind of tired people look when they have been carrying something for too long. "Mara," I said. She shook her head. "No." "Then let's go." But she did not move. The booth door opened wider. A soft orange glow appeared inside, though the candles were still out. Mara laughed under her breath. That's not fair. The words were not for me. She stepped forward. Don't. She looked at my hand, then at me. You don't get it. I don't need to get it. Her eyes filled with tears. That's the problem with all of us, isn't it? Then she went in. The door closed. I stood alone in the aisle. I could hear the others outside arguing, but their voices sounded far away, like they were underwater. The church around me seemed bigger now. The walls stretched upward. The pews had longer shadows. The paintings on the walls had changed. I noticed that then. The paintings were not religious scenes anymore. They were faces. Faded portraits in old wooden frames. Men, women, children, all staring forward with calm, empty eyes. Beneath each portrait was a small brass plaque. I stepped closer to one. The name read, Elena Marquez, 1911. Another, Tomas Herrera, 1924. Another, Rebecca Vale, 1968. There were dozens, maybe hundreds. And at the end of the row, closest to the confession booth, were 4 empty frames. No portraits, just blank yellowing canvas. My mouth went dry. From inside the booth, Mara said, Please. The whisper answered. I could not understand the words at first. Then I heard my name, not spoken by Mara, spoken by the thing behind the curtain. Ask him. Mara went silent. Ask him, the whisper repeated. The booth door opened. Mara stepped out. Her eyes found mine immediately. What did you do? She asked. I felt something cold move through my stomach. What? What did you do? The church was quiet. Too quiet. I could feel the whole building waiting for my answer. I don't know what you mean. Mara wiped her face with the heel of her hand. The voice said you brought us here. No, Grant found the church. The voice said this place doesn't appear unless everyone has something to confess. I laughed because I needed the sound. That's insane. Is it? Behind her, the confession booth door opened. For me. I shook my head. No. Mara said nothing. Outside, Grant shouted that we had to leave. Diego yelled back. Sophia was sobbing. Their voices drifted through the open church doors, thin and distant. Mara walked past me. She did not touch me. That somehow hurt more than if she had shoved me. I stood alone. The booth waited. I tried to walk out. I truly did. I turned toward the doors and took one step. The church bell rang. Once. The sound drove me to my knees. Not from pain. From memory. A memory I had spent 7 years packing away piece by piece, telling myself it was not the same as guilt because I had not meant for it to happen. That is what people say when they want to survive themselves. I had not meant for it to happen. I was 19. There had been a party near a canyon outside our town. Too many people. Too much drinking. Too much noise bouncing off the rocks. There was a girl there named Clara. She was quiet. New. The kind of person people forget to include until they need someone to laugh at. I did not hurt her. That is what I told myself. I only watched. I watched Grant and 2 other guys take her backpack as a joke. I watched her follow them away from the fire, angry and embarrassed. I watched the joke turn mean. I watched her run off into the dark. Later, I heard her calling. Not screaming. Calling. Asking if anyone was there. I was the only one close enough to hear. I had my phone in my hand. I could have answered. I could have gotten help. But I saw headlights approaching the dirt road, and I thought it was the police. I had alcohol in my bag. I had pills that were not mine. I was scared of getting arrested, scared of my parents finding out, scared of my scholarship disappearing. So I stayed quiet. I let the desert answer her. By morning, Clara was gone. People searched for 2 days. Then 5. Then the search got smaller. Then it stopped. I never told anyone I heard her. Grant knew about the party. He knew about the prank. But he did not know about the call. No one did. Except the church. I do not remember standing up. I only remember finding myself in front of the confession booth. The wood was warm under my hand. The door opened before I touched it. Inside, it smelled like candle wax and desert rain. I sat. The door shut. For a few seconds, there was only darkness. Then the curtain moved. A voice whispered from the other side. Not the voice from before. Not dry. Not old. A girl's voice. Soft. Tired. Why didn't you answer? I could not breathe. No, I whispered. The voice asked again. Why didn't you answer? I pressed my hands over my ears. But I still heard her. Not in the booth. In me. I was scared, I said. The curtain was still. That's all. I shook my head, though she could not see me. I didn't think it would matter. The booth grew colder. That's all. I started crying then. Harder than I had cried in years. No, I said. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would stop being my problem. The words left me like something rotten being pulled out. And once they were out, I knew they were true. The whisper did not comfort me. It did not forgive me. It only said, say her name. I did. The moment I said Clara, the church bell rang. The booth door opened. I stumbled out into candlelight. All the candles were burning again. Every portrait on the wall was facing me. Mara, Sophia, Diego, and Grant stood at the entrance. They had heard. I knew they had heard. Nobody spoke. We left the church without another word. Outside, the desert looked normal again. Too bright. Too wide. The SUV was exactly where we left it, but the sand around it was covered in footprints. Not just ours. Hundreds of them. All leading toward the church. None leading away. Grant drove. Nobody argued about that. For almost an hour, there was only the road, the dust, and the sound of the air conditioner failing. Then Sophia said, "Pull over." Grant did not. She said it again. "Pull over." He kept driving. Sophia unbuckled her seatbelt. Mara grabbed her. "What are you doing?" Sophia stared out the window. "I have to go back." "No, you don't." "Yes, I do." Her voice was empty. The booth didn't finish. Grant slammed the brakes. The SUV skidded in the dirt. Sophia opened the door and stepped out. Mara followed. So did Diego. So did I. We looked back the way we had come. The desert was empty. No church. No bell tower. No white walls. Just scrubland and heat. Grant turned the SUV around anyway. We drove back and forth for 40 minutes. Nothing. Santa Carina was gone too. The ruins. The foundations. The roofless wall. Everything. Only desert. Grant threw the guidebook out the window before we reached pavement. None of us stopped him. That night, we stayed at a motel in Las Cruces. Separate rooms. No one suggested dinner. No one asked if anyone was okay. Around midnight, someone knocked on my door. I opened it and found Mara standing there. She looked like she had not slept in weeks. "You should tell someone," she said. I knew what she meant. "So should you," I said. She flinched. Then she nodded. "Yeah, that was the last honest conversation we ever had." Over the next few months, things fell apart quietly. Sophia withdrew from school before the semester began. Diego deleted all his social media. Grant disappeared from our group chat and later moved somewhere up north. Mara sent me one text 6 months later. It said, "I confessed." It didn't help, but it was real. Asterisk asterisk. I never replied. Not because I did not care. Because I had not confessed. Not really. I told the church. I told the thing behind the curtain. But I never told Clara's family. I almost did many times. I typed letters and deleted them. I drove to their street once and sat outside for 20 minutes before leaving. I told myself reopening the past would only hurt people. That was a lie. The truth was simpler. I was still scared. Last year, I started hearing bells. Not often, only when I lied. The first time was at work, when someone asked if I had finished a report, and I said yes. One low bell note rang somewhere behind me. Nobody else reacted. The second time was when my mother asked if I was happy, and I said I was fine. Bell. The third time was when a friend asked why I never talked about that road trip anymore. Bell. After that, I stopped lying as much. Not because I became good, because I became afraid. 2 weeks ago, I received a package with no return address. Inside was the old guidebook Grant had thrown into the desert. The cover was warped from heat. Sand fell from the pages when I opened it. I flipped to the section about San Esteban del Silencio. The photo of the church was different. There were 5 people standing in front of it now. Tiny, blurry figures beside the entrance. Mara, Diego, Sophia, Grant, me. Below the photo, someone had written a new line in black ink. The church appears only to those who mistake silence for innocence. I have not slept much since then. Yesterday, I finally drove to Clara's hometown. I parked outside her parents' house for nearly an hour. The letter was in my passenger seat. My hands kept shaking. Then, just as I reached for the envelope, I heard a whisper from the back seat. Not yet. I looked in the mirror. The road behind me was empty. But in the reflection, far away beyond the houses, beyond the telephone poles, beyond the edge of town, I saw the desert. And in the desert stood a white Spanish church with a small bell tower. The doors were open. The candles were burning. And this time, there were 5 portraits hanging beside the entrance. 4 of them were finished. Mine was still blank. I am writing this now because I think the church is waiting for me to choose. Not between confession and silence. That choice passed a long time ago. I think it is waiting to see whether I confess because I am sorry, or because I am afraid of being called back. And the worst part is, I still do not know the difference. Story 5. The first thing they teach you in a small-town sheriff's office is that most calls are not emergencies. They feel like emergencies to the person calling, of course. A loose dog. A loud truck. A drunk uncle who won't leave the porch. A neighbor's porch light shining through someone's bedroom window. You show up, you listen, you write it down, and most nights you go home with nothing worse than bad coffee breath and dust on your boots. That was what I thought the first time Mrs. Alvarez called. My name is Caleb Reyes. I was 26 then, working as a deputy in a little New Mexico town about an hour and a half outside Albuquerque. I won't say the name of the town because people still live there, and some of them remember this. Some of them remember me too. Back then I was new enough to still press my uniform every morning, but tired enough to understand why the older guys laughed at me for it. I worked nights mostly. Long stretches of empty road. Gas stations buzzing under white lights. Coyotes crossing the highway like they owned it. The radio popping every now and then just to remind me I wasn't completely alone. Mrs. Alvarez lived off County Road 14, in a small adobe house with a tin roof and a dead cottonwood tree leaning over the yard. Her husband, Elias, had passed away almost a year before. Heart attack, according to everyone in town. They had been married 40-something years. The first call came in around 11:40 on a Tuesday night. Dispatch patched it through as a welfare concern. Caller says there's a man outside her window, Denise said over the radio. Possibly her late husband. She sounds confused. I remember sighing, not because I didn't care, but because I thought I already understood the situation. Elderly widow. Grief. Dark house. Wind making shadows move. When I pulled into her driveway, the headlights swept over the yard. A rusted swing set. 2 clay pots by the porch. A line of laundry stiff from the cold night air. Nothing else. Mrs. Alvarez opened the door before I even knocked. She was small, maybe in her late 70s, with silver hair braided down her back and a blue robe wrapped tight around her body. "Deputy," she whispered. "He was there." "Who was, ma'am?" She looked past me into the yard. "My Elias." I kept my voice soft. "Your husband?" She nodded, and her eyes filled with tears. "No, not him. Something wearing him." That was the first phrase she used. Wearing him. I asked if I could come in. Her house smelled like old coffee, lavender soap, and wood smoke. Family photos lined the hallway. In almost every one, Elias Alvarez stood beside her, a tall man with broad shoulders and a calm, serious face. She pointed to the kitchen window. "He stands right there," she said. "By the fence. He smiles like him, but he is not him." I checked the yard. I checked the shed. I walked the fence line with my flashlight. No footprints, at least none I could make sense of in the hard dirt. No broken lock. No sign anyone had been there. When I came back in, she was sitting at the kitchen table, twisting a tissue in her hands. "Mrs. Alvarez," I said carefully, "sometimes when we lose someone, especially after many years, the mind can play tricks on us at night." She looked at me like I had disappointed her. "I know grief, Deputy. This is not grief." I didn't know what to say to that. I filed the report as a suspicious person call. No suspect located, and I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. She called again 2 nights later. Same time, almost exactly. This time she said Elias was standing near the road, facing the house. When I arrived, there was nobody there. Just the desert stretching black in every direction, and the porch light flickering like it was struggling to stay alive. The 3rd call came that Saturday. "He tapped on the glass," she said over the phone. I could hear her breathing hard. "He tapped 3 times like Elias used to." That detail bothered me. Not enough to scare me yet. Just enough to stick in my head. I went out again. Nothing. One of the senior deputies, Harris, started giving me a hard time. "Your girlfriend call again?" he asked, leaning back in his chair with his boots on the desk. "She's scared," I said. "She's lonely," he answered. "There's a difference." Maybe he was right. That was the problem. Everything had a reasonable explanation if you wanted one badly enough. By the 5th call, I knew the route to her house without thinking. Left past the closed feed store, straight through the dry wash, right where the pavement cracked and turned pale. I would drive with one hand on the wheel and one hand near the radio, telling myself I was just doing my job. But each time, Mrs. Alvarez looked worse. She stopped sleeping. Her eyes sank deeper. She kept every curtain drawn except the kitchen one, because she said closing it made him angry. One night, I found her sitting in the living room with all the lights off. "Why are you in the dark?" I asked. "So I can see him before he sees me." That line stayed with me for years. I told her I could ask a relative to stay with her. She shook her head. "My daughter lives in Las Cruces. She thinks I'm losing my mind. Are you sure you don't want me to call her?" "No," she said. "He wants more people here." I frowned. "Who does?" She stared at the kitchen window. "The thing outside." A week later, I saw him. I was driving back from another call near midnight, maybe 10 miles from Mrs. Alvarez's house. The road was empty, dark enough that my headlights looked like tunnels through the black. Then a man appeared on the shoulder. I slammed the brakes so hard my seat belt locked across my chest. He stood beside a mile marker, facing the road. Older man. Tall. Gray hair. Brown jacket. Hands hanging loose at his sides. For 1 second, I thought I'd hit him. My heart sank into my stomach as the cruiser rocked to a stop, and I just sat there gripping the wheel. The man didn't move. I turned on my spotlight. His face came into view. I had seen it before in Mrs. Alvarez's hallway photos. Elias, or something close enough to him that my brain refused to accept it. My mouth went dry. I reached for the radio. "Dispatch, this is Reyes. I've got a pedestrian on County Road 14 near Marker 6. Possible elderly male." The man smiled. Not big, not wild, just a small, calm smile. Then he stepped backward into the darkness. Not turned, not walked. Stepped backward. The light caught him for half a second more, and then he was gone. I got out of the cruiser, flashlight shaking in my hand. The air was cold, and the desert was silent in that way it only gets after midnight, like everything alive has decided to hold its breath. "Sir?" I called. No answer. I walked to the shoulder. My boots crunched over gravel. I swept my light across the brush, the ditch, the fence beyond it. Nothing. No man. No footprints. No sound. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the whisper of movement from somewhere beyond the fence made me freeze, every nerve screaming that I was not imagining this. I got back in the cruiser and locked the doors. I didn't tell Harris exactly what I saw. I said I'd spotted someone matching Elias's description near the road, but couldn't locate him after he left the shoulder. Harris stared at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Elias Alvarez has been dead 11 months. "I know. No kid. I don't think you do." That was the first time he didn't make a joke. The calls continued, but something changed after I saw him. Mrs. Alvarez stopped sounding afraid for herself. She sounded afraid for me. "Do not come alone," she told me one night. "Ma'am, I'm already on the way. Turn around." "I can't do that." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He knows your name now." My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. "What did you say?" "He said it from the yard. He said, 'Caleb is tired.'" I almost drove off the road. Because I was tired. I had been awake for almost 20 hours. I had complained about it to nobody. Not out loud. Not anywhere anyone could hear. The street looked ordinary, quiet, even comforting when I turned onto her property. But my gut told me something was off. I'd learned too late that danger often wears a familiar face. This time, when I pulled up, Mrs. Alvarez was not on the porch. The front door was open. That was when fear stopped being a thought and became something physical. I drew my weapon and moved slowly toward the house. "Mrs. Alvarez?" No answer. Inside, the house was freezing. The kind of cold that feels wet in your lungs. The kitchen light swung slightly overhead, even though there was no breeze. I found her in the hallway, standing perfectly still, facing the back door. "Ma'am," I said. "Step toward me." She didn't move. Then I heard tapping. 3 soft taps on the back door glass. Tap, tap, tap. Mrs. Alvarez began to cry without making a sound. I moved closer, my gun raised. Through the little square window in the door, I saw a face. Elias Alvarez stood outside. His skin looked pale under the porch light. His eyes were too still. His smile was gentle and empty. Then his mouth moved. But the voice came from behind me. "Caleb." I spun so fast I nearly slipped. The hallway behind me was empty. Mrs. Alvarez whispered, "Don't answer it." The tapping came again, harder this time. Tap, tap, tap. I grabbed Mrs. Alvarez by the arm and pulled her toward the living room. "Stay behind me." The back door handle turned. Locked. It turned again, slowly, like whatever stood there was testing how afraid we were. I backed us toward the front door. My radio hissed on my shoulder. I tried calling dispatch, but the signal broke into static. "Dispatch, this is Reyes. I need backup at Alvarez residence. Possible break-in." Static. Then a voice came through. Not Denise. A man's voice. Soft. Familiar. Almost kind. "Caleb is tired." My hand went cold around the radio. Mrs. Alvarez made the sign of the cross. The back door clicked. I don't know how it unlocked. I know I had checked it. I know Mrs. Alvarez said she kept it bolted every night. But I heard it. My heart sank into my stomach as the door clicked shut behind me, and I realized I was completely alone in that decision. Run with her now, or stand there pretending my badge made me braver than I was. So I ran. I pulled Mrs. Alvarez through the front door and down the porch steps. She stumbled once, and I almost lost my grip on her. Behind us, from inside the house, something laughed. Not loud, not crazy, just Elias's voice, amused, like he had watched a child do something foolish. I shoved Mrs. Alvarez into the passenger seat of my cruiser. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my hands trembling as I fumbled for the keys. Every second felt stretched, like time itself was conspiring against me. The engine turned over. My headlights washed across the yard, and there he was, standing at the edge of the driveway. Elias. Only now he didn't look quite right. His shoulders were too narrow. His arms hung too long. His head tilted at an angle that made my stomach twist. I threw the car into reverse. He didn't chase us. He just raised one hand, like he was saying goodbye. Backup met us halfway to town. Harris was in the first cruiser. He took one look at my face and didn't say a word. They searched Mrs. Alvarez's house that night. They found muddy marks inside near the back door, even though there had been no rain for weeks. They found the kitchen window cracked from the outside. They found an old photo of Elias and Mrs. Alvarez placed neatly on the kitchen table. It had not been there earlier. Across the back of it, someone had written one sentence in pencil. "Thank you for sending him." After that, nobody laughed at the calls anymore. Mrs. Alvarez stayed with her daughter in Las Cruces. She never went back to that house. As far as I know, it still sits empty. The official report said possible trespassing, unknown suspect, elderly caller relocated for safety. That was it. No mention of Elias. No mention of the voice on the radio. No mention of how every deputy who responded that night heard something moving out past the fence, circling us in the dark, never close enough to see. I quit 6 months later. People assume it was because I got scared. That's partly true, but the real reason is harder to explain. 2 weeks after Mrs. Alvarez moved away, we got another call from her old address. Denise took it. She went pale and waved Harris over. The line was mostly static. Then an old woman's voice came through, shaking and breathless. It sounded exactly like Mrs. Alvarez. She said something was standing outside her house wearing her dead husband's face. But Mrs. Alvarez was 200 miles away, asleep in her daughter's guest room. Harris told Denise to disconnect. No unit was sent. For a while, that seemed to be the end. Years have passed now. I live in Arizona. I work a normal job. I don't carry a badge. I don't drive empty roads at night unless I absolutely have to. But sometimes, when I'm half asleep, I hear 3 soft taps against my bedroom window. I live on the 2nd floor, and last month I received a voicemail from a blocked number. It was mostly static. Then a man's voice whispered my name. Caleb. Caleb is tired. Even after escaping, even with the memory of police lights behind me, a small, cold part of me couldn't stop replaying the face I'd seen through that window. The calm, empty eyes that didn't blink. I used to think Mrs. Alvarez was the one being hunted. Now I think she was bait. And I think maybe the first call was never meant for her at all. The first thing they teach you in a small-town sheriff's office is that most calls are not emergencies. They feel like emergencies to the person calling, of course. A loose dog. A loud truck. A drunk uncle who won't leave the porch. A neighbor's porch light shining through someone's bedroom window. You show up, you listen, you write it down, and most nights you go home with nothing worse than bad coffee breath and dust on your boots. That was what I thought the first time Mrs. Alvarez called. My name is Caleb Reyes. I was 26 then, working as a deputy in a little New Mexico town about an hour and a half outside Albuquerque. I won't say the name of the town because people still live there, and some of them remember this. Some of them remember me too. Back then I was new enough to still press my uniform every morning, but tired enough to understand why the older guys laughed at me for it. I worked nights mostly. Long stretches of empty road. Gas stations buzzing under white lights. Coyotes crossing the highway like they owned it. The radio popping every now and then just to remind me I wasn't completely alone. Mrs. Alvarez lived off County Road 14, in a small adobe house with a tin roof and a dead cottonwood tree leaning over the yard. Her husband, Elias, had passed away almost a year before. Heart attack, according to everyone in town. They had been married 40-something years. The first call came in around 11:40 on a Tuesday night. Dispatch patched it through as a welfare concern. Caller says there's a man outside her window, Denise said over the radio. Possibly her late husband. She sounds confused. I remember sighing, not because I didn't care, but because I thought I already understood the situation. Elderly widow. Grief. Dark house. Wind making shadows move. When I pulled into her driveway, the headlights swept over the yard. A rusted swing set. 2 clay pots by the porch. A line of laundry stiff from the cold night air. Nothing else. Mrs. Alvarez opened the door before I even knocked. She was small, maybe in her late 70s, with silver hair braided down her back and a blue robe wrapped tight around her body. "Deputy," she whispered. "He was there." "Who was, ma'am?" She looked past me into the yard. "My Elias." I kept my voice soft. "Your husband?" She nodded, and her eyes filled with tears. "No, not him. Something wearing him." That was the first phrase she used. Wearing him. I asked if I could come in. Her house smelled like old coffee, lavender soap, and wood smoke. Family photos lined the hallway. In almost every one, Elias Alvarez stood beside her, a tall man with broad shoulders and a calm, serious face. She pointed to the kitchen window. "He stands right there," she said. "By the fence. He smiles like him, but he is not him." I checked the yard. I checked the shed. I walked the fence line with my flashlight. No footprints, at least none I could make sense of in the hard dirt. No broken lock. No sign anyone had been there. When I came back in, she was sitting at the kitchen table, twisting a tissue in her hands. "Mrs. Alvarez," I said carefully, "sometimes when we lose someone, especially after many years, the mind can play tricks on us at night." She looked at me like I had disappointed her. "I know grief, Deputy. This is not grief." I didn't know what to say to that. I filed the report as a suspicious person call. No suspect located. And I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. She called again 2 nights later. Same time, almost exactly. This time she said Elias was standing near the road, facing the house. When I arrived, there was nobody there. Just the desert stretching black in every direction, and the porch light flickering like it was struggling to stay alive. The 3rd call came that Saturday. "He tapped on the glass," she said over the phone. I could hear her breathing hard. "He tapped 3 times, like Elias used to." That detail bothered me. Not enough to scare me yet. Just enough to stick in my head. I went out again. Nothing. One of the senior deputies, Harris, started giving me a hard time. "Your girlfriend call again?" he asked, leaning back in his chair with his boots on the desk. "She's scared," I said. "She's lonely," he answered. "There's a difference." Maybe he was right. That was the problem. Everything had a reasonable explanation if you wanted one badly enough. By the 5th call, I knew the route to her house without thinking. Left past the closed feed store, straight through the dry wash, right where the pavement cracked and turned pale. I would drive with one hand on the wheel and one hand near the radio, telling myself I was just doing my job. But each time, Mrs. Alvarez looked worse. She stopped sleeping. Her eyes sank deeper. She kept every curtain drawn except the kitchen one, because she said closing it made him angry. One night, I found her sitting in the living room with all the lights off. "Why are you in the dark?" I asked. "So I can see him before he sees me." That line stayed with me for years. I told her I could ask a relative to stay with her. She shook her head. "My daughter lives in Las Cruces. She thinks I'm losing my mind. Are you sure you don't want me to call her?" "No," she said. "He wants more people here." I frowned. "Who does?" She stared at the kitchen window. "The thing outside." A week later, I saw him. I was driving back from another call near midnight, maybe 10 miles from Mrs. Alvarez's house. The road was empty, dark enough that my headlights looked like tunnels through the black. Then a man appeared on the shoulder. I slammed the brakes so hard my seat belt locked across my chest. He stood beside a mile marker, facing the road. Older man. Tall. Gray hair. Brown jacket. Hands hanging loose at his sides. For 1 second, I thought I'd hit him. My heart sank into my stomach as the cruiser rocked to a stop, and I just sat there gripping the wheel. The man didn't move. I turned on my spotlight. His face came into view. I had seen it before in Mrs. Alvarez's hallway photos. Elias. Or something close enough to him that my brain refused to accept it. My mouth went dry. I reached for the radio. "Dispatch, this is Reyes. I've got a pedestrian on County Road 14 near Marker 6. Possible elderly male." The man smiled. Not big, not wild, just a small, calm smile. Then he stepped backward into the darkness. Not turned, not walked. Stepped backward. The light caught him for half a second more, and then he was gone. I got out of the cruiser, flashlight shaking in my hand. The air was cold, and the desert was silent in that way it only gets after midnight, like everything alive has decided to hold its breath. "Sir?" I called. No answer. I walked to the shoulder. My boots crunched over gravel. I swept my light across the brush, the ditch, the fence beyond it. Nothing. No man. No footprints. No sound. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the whisper of movement from somewhere beyond the fence made me freeze, every nerve screaming that I was not imagining this. I got back in the cruiser and locked the doors. I didn't tell Harris exactly what I saw. I said I'd spotted someone matching Elias's description near the road, but couldn't locate him after he left the shoulder. Harris stared at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Elias Alvarez has been dead 11 months. I know. No, kid. I don't think you do." That was the first time he didn't make a joke. The calls continued. But something changed after I saw him. Mrs. Alvarez stopped sounding afraid for herself. She sounded afraid for me. "Do not come alone," she told me one night. "Ma'am, I'm already on the way. Turn around." "I can't do that." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He knows your name now." My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. "What did you say?" "He said it from the yard. He said, 'Caleb is tired.' I almost drove off the road. Because I was tired. I had been awake for almost 20 hours. I had complained about it to nobody. Not out loud. Not anywhere anyone could hear. The street looked ordinary, quiet, even comforting when I turned onto her property. But my gut told me something was off. I'd learned too late that danger often wears a familiar face. This time, when I pulled up, Mrs. Alvarez was not on the porch. The front door was open. That was when fear stopped being a thought and became something physical. I drew my weapon and moved slowly toward the house. "Mrs. Alvarez?" No answer. Inside, the house was freezing. The kind of cold that feels wet in your lungs. The kitchen light swung slightly overhead, even though there was no breeze. I found her in the hallway, standing perfectly still, facing the back door. "Ma'am," I said. "Step toward me." She didn't move. Then I heard tapping. 3 soft taps on the back door glass. Tap, tap, tap. Mrs. Alvarez began to cry without making a sound. I moved closer, my gun raised. Through the little square window in the door, I saw a face. Elias Alvarez stood outside. His skin looked pale under the porch light. His eyes were too still. His smile was gentle and empty. Then his mouth moved. But the voice came from behind me. "Caleb." I spun so fast I nearly slipped. The hallway behind me was empty. Mrs. Alvarez whispered, "Don't answer it." The tapping came again, harder this time. Tap, tap, tap. I grabbed Mrs. Alvarez by the arm and pulled her toward the living room. "Stay behind me." The back door handle turned. Locked. It turned again, slowly, like whatever stood there was testing how afraid we were. I backed us toward the front door. My radio hissed on my shoulder. I tried calling dispatch, but the signal broke into static. "Dispatch, this is Reyes. I need backup at Alvarez residence. Possible break-in." Static. Then a voice came through. Not Denise. A man's voice. Soft. Familiar. Almost kind. "Caleb is tired." My hand went cold around the radio. Mrs. Alvarez made the sign of the cross. The back door clicked. I don't know how it unlocked. I know I had checked it. I know Mrs. Alvarez said she kept it bolted every night. But I heard it. My heart sank into my stomach as the door clicked shut behind me, and I realized I was completely alone in that decision. Run with her now, or stand there pretending my badge made me braver than I was. So I ran. I pulled Mrs. Alvarez through the front door and down the porch steps. She stumbled once, and I almost lost my grip on her. Behind us, from inside the house, something laughed. Not loud, not crazy, just Elias's voice, amused, like he had watched a child do something foolish. I shoved Mrs. Alvarez into the passenger seat of my cruiser. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my hands trembling as I fumbled for the keys. Every second felt stretched, like time itself was conspiring against me. The engine turned over. My headlights washed across the yard, and there he was, standing at the edge of the driveway. Elias. Only now he didn't look quite right. His shoulders were too narrow. His arms hung too long. His head tilted at an angle that made my stomach twist. I threw the car into reverse. He didn't chase us. He just raised one hand, like he was saying goodbye. Backup met us halfway to town. Harris was in the first cruiser. He took one look at my face and didn't say a word. They searched Mrs. Alvarez's house that night. They found muddy marks inside near the back door, even though there had been no rain for weeks. They found the kitchen window cracked from the outside. They found an old photo of Elias and Mrs. Alvarez placed neatly on the kitchen table. It had not been there earlier. Across the back of it, someone had written one sentence in pencil. "Thank you for sending him." After that, nobody laughed at the calls anymore. Mrs. Alvarez stayed with her daughter in Las Cruces. She never went back to that house. As far as I know, it still sits empty. The official report said possible trespassing, unknown suspect, elderly caller relocated for safety. That was it. No mention of Elias. No mention of the voice on the radio. No mention of how every deputy who responded that night heard something moving out past the fence, circling us in the dark, never close enough to see. I quit 6 months later. People assume it was because I got scared. That's partly true, but the real reason is harder to explain. 2 weeks after Mrs. Alvarez moved away, we got another call from her old address. Denise took it. She went pale and waved Harris over. The line was mostly static. Then an old woman's voice came through, shaking and breathless. It sounded exactly like Mrs. Alvarez. She said something was standing outside her house wearing her dead husband's face. But Mrs. Alvarez was 200 miles away, asleep in her daughter's guest room. Harris told Denise to disconnect. No unit was sent. For a while, that seemed to be the end. Years have passed now. I live in Arizona. I work a normal job. I don't carry a badge. I don't drive empty roads at night unless I absolutely have to. But sometimes when I'm half asleep, I hear 3 soft taps against my bedroom window. I live on the 2nd floor. And last month, I received a voicemail from a blocked number. It was mostly static. Then a man's voice whispered my name. Caleb. Caleb is tired. Even after escaping, even with the memory of police lights behind me, a small, cold part of me couldn't stop replaying the face I'd seen through that window. The calm, empty eyes that didn't blink. I used to think Mrs. Alvarez was the one being hunted. Now I think she was bait. And I think maybe the first call was never meant for her at all. Story 6. I didn't believe places could react to people until I went inside that mine near Silver City. At the time, I was 29, doing freelance photography and short video work. Nothing glamorous, real estate shoots, occasional weddings, cheap travel content when I could afford gas. My friend Mark was the one who pushed me into urban exploring. He had this obsession with abandoned places, the kind of guy who thought rust and decay were honest art. We'd been talking online about an old silver mine outside Silver City, New Mexico. Closed decades ago after a collapse, officially marked as unstable. No tours, no entry. The kind of place that makes you more curious the more people tell you not to go. We didn't go for money or content. That's the part one still don't fully understand. We just wanted proof that it was real. The morning we drove out there, the desert felt unusually still. No wind, no birds, just that flat, watchful silence you get in empty land. The road got worse the closer we got, cracked asphalt turning into gravel, then just tire tracks through dry earth. Mark kept joking in the car. "If we die, I want my camera buried with me," he said. I laughed, but it came out thin. The entrance wasn't marked. Just a rusted fence half collapsed into the dirt, and a dark opening in the hillside like a missing tooth. Above it, old timber beams framed the mouth of the mine, sagging slightly like something tired. It didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused, like it was waiting. We geared up anyway. Headlamps, spare batteries, water, a rope Mark insisted we bring, just in case we find anything cool to climb. The first few minutes inside were normal. Just rock walls and narrow tunnels, the kind you expect from old mines. Our footsteps echoed in a predictable way. Our voices sounded too loud, so we naturally started whispering without thinking about it. That was the first strange thing. The silence didn't behave like silence. It pressed back. About 10 minutes in, I noticed my headlamp flickering every time I spoke above a whisper. "Did your light just do that?" I asked. It dimmed for a second, then stabilized. Mark shrugged. "Old wiring maybe?" Could be dust in the contacts. We kept going deeper. The air got colder in a way that didn't match the temperature outside. Not just cool underground air, this was heavier, like it had weight. And then we heard it. A sound. Low. Slow. Rhythmic. At first I thought it was wind moving through a shaft, but there was no airflow. The sound wasn't random either. It was consistent. Inhale. Pause. Exhale. Mark stopped walking. I saw the beam of his flashlight freeze on the tunnel wall. "Tell me you hear that," he whispered. I didn't answer right away. I was trying to convince myself it was water dripping somewhere deeper. Mines do that. Mines make noises. But this wasn't dripping. It was breathing. The kind of breathing that felt too deliberate to belong to the environment. We followed it anyway. That's the part one regret most. The tunnel started changing after that. Not suddenly. Gradually enough that you doubt your memory. At one point, the walls were rough, jagged rock. Later, they were smoother. Too smooth. Like something had been worn down by constant contact. Then I noticed something else. Every time one of us spoke normally, not whispering, our headlamps flickered harder. Almost like the mine was reacting to volume. "Okay," Mark said louder, testing it. His light stuttered violently, then went dim for 2 seconds. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Don't do that." We started whispering without agreeing to it. Not because we were scared exactly. Because it felt necessary. Like the mind preferred it. We reached a wider chamber, maybe 30 minutes later. That's when things stopped making sense entirely. There were markings on the wall. Not modern graffiti. Old scratches. Deep grooves. Some geometric, some almost like symbols, but not quite readable. They didn't look carved for decoration. They looked repeated. Like someone had traced them over and over until the stone gave in. Mark ran his hand near one of them. "Could be ancient," he said. His voice echoed slightly louder than it should have. The lights flickered immediately. Not randomly. Synchronized. Like a response. That's when the breathing got closer. Not moving through space. Getting louder. As if the source wasn't ahead of us anymore. But everywhere. "I don't like this," I said. Mark nodded, but I saw something else in his face. Curiosity still winning over fear. That's how it gets you. It never feels dangerous enough at first. We moved deeper anyway, and then the mind changed for the first time in a way I can describe clearly. The tunnel behind us was gone. Not collapsed. Not blocked. Gone. Just a solid wall of stone where we had walked through minutes before. I remember turning around and staring at it for a full 10 seconds, waiting for it to make sense. Mark laughed nervously. "Okay, that's not possible." I checked my GPS. No signal. Of course. We should have left then. Instead, the breathing shifted. It became slower, deeper, like it was listening. And then it started reacting to us directly. Mark said, "We need to head back." The lights flickered hard. I said, "Yeah, let's go." Flicker again. We stopped speaking. That's when the tunnel ahead changed shape. I know how insane that sounds. I don't have a better way to explain it. The passage that had been straight started angling slightly to the right. Not like an illusion. Like the geometry had physically shifted when we weren't looking. Mark shone his light forward and froze. What the hell? The tunnel wasn't the same anymore. It was narrower. Claustrophobic. Almost like it was compressing itself. And then, very softly, we heard something new inside the breathing. A thought. Not words exactly. But intent. Fear. My headlamp flickered. Mark's flickered harder. And the tunnel changed again. This time it got worse. We turned around, and the way we came in was replaced by a tight, low passage that forced us to crouch. "I don't like this," Mark said again, but his voice shook now. The mind responded instantly. Lights died for half a second. When they came back, the walls were closer. That's when I understood. It wasn't just reacting to sound. It was reacting to emotion, specifically fear. And it was learning what we were afraid of. We moved forward because backward didn't exist anymore. The passage tightened more. Mark started breathing heavier. I could hear it echoing in the tunnel, mixing with the mind's own rhythm until I couldn't tell which was which. Then he stopped. "Something's wrong with my light," he said. I turned. His beam wasn't pointing forward anymore. It was pointing behind him. Not because he moved it, because the tunnel had shifted his orientation. The mine was recentering us, like we were not moving through it, like it was moving through us. Then Mark said something I still think about. "It feels like it knows I'm scared of tight spaces." And immediately after he said it, the tunnel collapsed inward. Not crushing us, just enough to make it tighter, closer, breathing distance tight. We both panicked. That was the worst mistake. We ran, and the mine responded instantly. The tunnels rearranged around us like a living thing shifting its body. Every time we ran faster, it got narrower. Every time we slowed down, it waited. It wasn't chasing. It was shaping. Mark fell first. I heard him hit the ground, flashlight rolling, his breathing turning sharp. "Don't leave me," he said. But the mine changed again, and suddenly I wasn't looking at Mark anymore. I was looking at a tunnel that felt like a throat. I ran anyway. I don't know how long I ran like that. Minutes. Hours. Time stopped making sense underground. At some point, I realized something terrifying. The breathing wasn't just around us. It was inside the walls. Inside the rock itself. Every step I took echoed, like I was walking through a giant sleeping body. Then I saw light ahead. Not headlamp light. Natural light. The exit. I pushed forward, desperate, lungs burning, until I collapsed out onto the desert floor. I turned around immediately. The mine entrance was still there. Same shape. Same timber frame. But something was wrong. It felt smaller, like it had exhaled me. I waited for Mark. He never came out. I called his name until my throat hurt. Nothing. I wanted to go back in. I almost did. But then I heard it again. The breathing. Right behind me. Slow. Patient. And for a second, just a second, I swear the mind didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt aware. Like it had finished watching me. I left without him. I still think about that drive back. The way the desert looked normal again, like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just been inside something alive. We reported Mark missing. Search teams went in. They found nothing. No gear. No body. No markings. Just an empty mine that showed no structural changes. That's what they told me. But I know what I heard. And I know what I saw. Because sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night, I can still hear it. Slow. Close. Breathing. And every now and then, when I speak too loudly in a quiet room, my lights still flicker. Story 7. I still remember the way the fluorescent lights buzzed above that gas station. Not flickered. Not hummed. Buzzed. Like a bug trapped inside a jar. I know that sounds like a strange thing to remember after everything that happened, but that sound is what comes back to me the most. Not the empty desert. Not the clerk's face. Not even the road that kept folding me back to the same place like the night itself had no edges. It's that dry electric buzz above the counter. And the old man behind it, staring at me like he already knew I was too stupid to listen. My name is Colin. I was 29 when this happened, living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, working as an overnight delivery driver for a small medical supply company. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid better than most jobs I'd had before. Clinics, pharmacies, urgent care offices, little rural practices in towns most people only pass through once. That was my route. Most nights were quiet, boring even. I'd load up the van around 9, grab gas station coffee, and spend hours driving highways where the only company was my GPS, the drone of the tires, and whatever podcast I had downloaded. I liked the solitude at first. It gave me time to think. Or not think. After my divorce, not thinking was usually better. That night was in late October. Cold desert night, clear sky, the kind where the stars looked too sharp. I had a late drop-off near a tiny town west of Socorro. Then I was supposed to head back toward Albuquerque before sunrise. The whole route was supposed to be simple. But around 1:40 in the morning, my gas light came on. I cursed at myself because I always told myself not to let it get that low out there. In the city, a gas light is annoying. In the desert, it feels personal. My GPS showed one station about 12 miles ahead, just off a two-lane road I didn't recognize. The name didn't come up, just a little fuel icon sitting in the dark like a promise. I almost kept going, but the needle was practically buried. So I turned. The road narrowed fast. No streetlights, no houses, just sand, black brush, and the pale line of my headlights sliding over the asphalt. Every few minutes, I'd glance at the GPS to make sure I hadn't missed the turn. It kept saying the station was ahead, but the road looked like it hadn't seen traffic in years. Then finally I saw it. A small gas station sitting alone under a weak rectangle of light. 2 pumps. A cracked sign with no visible brand name. A little convenience store with dirty windows and a red open sign glowing in one corner. The place looked old, but not abandoned. That somehow made it worse. I pulled up to pump 2 and sat there for a second with the engine running. The van's headlights washed over the front windows, and through the glass I saw a man behind the counter. He was standing perfectly still, not looking down at a magazine, not cleaning, not watching TV, just standing there, looking right at me. I told myself he was probably half asleep and bored out of his mind. I'd worked bad shifts before. I knew what 2 a.m. did to people. Still, I locked the van before walking inside. The bell above the door gave this tired little jingle. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Old coffee, dust, and something metallic under it, like wet coins. The store was tiny. A few shelves of chips, motor oil, beef jerky, sun-faded candy bars. There was an old cooler along the back wall, but I didn't hear it running. The clerk looked maybe 60, maybe older. Thin face, gray hair, deep lines around his mouth. He wore a faded blue work shirt with no name tag. He watched me walk in like I'd interrupted a funeral. "Pump 2, I said, pulling out my card. "Can I get 40 on it?" He didn't move. Then he looked at the wall clock behind me. I turned to look too. 1:57 a.m. When I faced him again, his expression had changed. Not much, just enough. "You heading west?" he asked. His voice was dry and low. I hesitated. "Yeah, for a while. Then north." He swallowed. His eyes moved to the windows, then back to me. "Don't drive west after 2. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do with that sentence. "Sorry?" He leaned forward a little. "Wait here until sunrise. Sleep in your van if you have to. But don't drive west after 2. I stared at him. There are moments where your brain rejects fear because it feels too inconvenient. I was tired. I had been driving for hours. I had a schedule. I had a boss who liked to pretend overnight deliveries were life or death military operations. And there was this strange old man telling me not to drive a certain direction after a certain time. So I gave him a polite little smile. "Appreciate it," I said, "but I've got work." His face tightened. He rang up the gas slowly. Too slowly. His fingers shook when he pressed the buttons. While the pump clicked outside, I grabbed a coffee from the machine. It came out lukewarm and bitter, but I paid for it anyway. The clerk kept looking at the clock. 1:59. As I turned to leave, he said my name. "Colin." My hand stopped on the door. My heart gave one hard thud. I looked back. He was staring at me, and for a second his eyes looked wet. "You told me your name," he said quickly. I hadn't. I know I hadn't. I wanted to call him out on it. I wanted to ask how he knew. But the store felt suddenly smaller, the aisles too narrow, the windows too black. So I did what people do when something is wrong but not wrong enough yet. I left. Outside, the cold air hit my face. The pump had stopped. I twisted the cap back on, got in the van, and locked the doors. My hands were unsteady, but I told myself he must have seen my delivery badge clipped to my jacket. Except my badge was in the van. I looked at the store through the windshield. The clerk stood in the window now, one hand pressed against the glass. I put the van in drive. The clock on the dash changed to 2 o'clock. My GPS told me to continue west for 27 miles. I laughed under my breath. "Not today, old man." Then I drove. For the first 10 minutes, nothing happened. The road was empty and straight. The coffee tasted terrible. My nerves settled. I even started feeling embarrassed, like I'd let some lonely desert weirdo get in my head. Then the GPS cut out. The map froze. The little blue arrow stopped moving, even though I was still driving. I tapped the screen. Nothing. The podcast stopped mid-sentence. Then my headlights caught something ahead. A sign. Gas 1 mile. I frowned. That didn't make sense. There hadn't been another station on the map. I slowed down as I came around a bend. And there it was. The same gas station. Same 2 pumps. Same dirty windows. Same red open sign. My foot eased off the gas. For a few seconds, I just rolled forward, staring. My brain tried to make it into something else. A different station. A similar station. Some weird desert coincidence. But my receipt was still on the passenger seat. The same cracked pump 2 stood under the same buzzing light. And in the window, the clerk was watching me. I didn't stop. I drove past, faster than I should have, gripping the wheel so hard my fingers ached. No, I whispered. No, no, no. I kept driving. The road stretched ahead, black and empty. No intersections. No turnoffs. No cars. I watched the odometer. 5 miles. 10. 15. Then I saw the sign again. Gas 1 mile. This time, my stomach dropped so hard I felt sick. I slowed almost to a stop. The gas station appeared from the darkness again. The clerk wasn't in the window this time. He was outside, standing near pump 2. His arms hung stiffly at his sides. His face looked pale under the lights. I pulled in because I didn't know what else to do. My heart was pounding so loudly I could feel it in my throat. When I stepped out, the desert was silent. Not quiet. Silent. No wind. No insects. Nothing but the buzzing lights. The clerk spoke before I could. You came back. His voice shook. What the hell is going on? I asked. He looked past me at the road. You drove west. I drove straight, I snapped. There's only one road. That's how it starts. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the look on his face stopped me. He wasn't messing with me. He looked terrified. Not for himself. For me. I backed toward the van. I'm calling the police. He gave a bitter little smile. Try. I pulled out my phone. No service. I held it higher, turning in place like an idiot. Nothing. The clerk stepped closer. Come inside. No. You need to listen to me. No. You need to tell me how you knew my name. He froze. The buzzing light above us seemed to get louder. Then he said, because I was you. I stared at him. He rubbed both hands over his face, and suddenly he looked exhausted in a way I can't explain. Like the tiredness went all the way through him. My name was Thomas Bell, he said. I was 31. I drove freight between Phoenix and Santa Fe. I stopped here in 1986. I shook my head slowly. That's not funny. I had a wife named Marlene, he said, ignoring me. A little boy named Jesse. I was supposed to be home by Sunday. I stepped back. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out something folded in plastic. A photograph, old and yellowed. A younger version of him stood beside a woman holding a baby. He looked different, but it was him. The photo trembled in his hand. I didn't listen either, he whispered. My skin went cold. You're saying you've been here since 1986. He looked at the store. I don't know how long anymore. The clock says what it wants. The dates don't matter in here. I turned toward the road, panic rising hot and fast. My body wanted motion. Any motion. Run. Drive. Scream. Anything but stand under those lights listening to an impossible story. This is insane, I said. There has to be another way out. There isn't. You don't know that. His eyes sharpened. I tried for years. That word hit me harder than the rest. Years. I got in the van and slammed the door. The clerk grabbed the window frame. Don't keep driving west. I started the engine. Then I'll go east. He shook his head. After 2, every road is west. I peeled out so fast the tires spat gravel. At the first chance, I made a U-turn and drove back the way I came. I watched the compass on my dash spin from E to W, then back to E, then blank. The road twisted, even though I was sure it had been straight before. My headlights swept over signs I didn't remember seeing. A rusted mile marker. A dead coyote that vanished from the rear view. A line of old telephone poles leaning like broken crosses. Then ahead, that same sign. Gas 1 mile. I screamed. I actually screamed, alone in that van like a child. When the station came into view again, the clerk was inside. I could see him through the window, pacing behind the counter. I didn't stop this time. I kept going past it. The road brought me back. Again and again. By the 5th time, I was crying. Not loud, not dramatic. Just these quiet, humiliating tears sliding down my face while I drove with both hands locked on the wheel. I tried dirt turnoffs that appeared and disappeared. I tried driving without headlights. I tried stopping in the middle of the road and waiting. The dark around me pressed close, and after a while the van's radio crackled to life. Not music. A man breathing. Slow, wet breaths through static. Then a voice whispered, "Pump 2." I drove back to the station. This time I went inside. The clerk had aged since I first saw him. I know that sounds impossible, but his cheeks looked hollower, his skin grayer. His hands shook harder as he poured coffee into a paper cup and set it on the counter for me. I didn't touch it. "What happens if I stay until sunrise?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. The wall clock behind him still read 2 o'clock. "It doesn't always come," he said. That was when I noticed the photos taped under the counter. At first, I thought they were old newspaper clippings. Missing persons, drivers, travelers, a family in a station wagon, a young couple, a trucker standing beside his rig, a woman in a nurse uniform, dozens of faces, some black and white, some faded color, some newer. The most recent one was a photo of me, not from my ID, not from Facebook. It showed me standing outside by Pump 2 about 20 minutes earlier, looking down at my phone. I reached for it, but the clerk slapped his hand over mine. "Don't." My heart sank into my stomach as the back door clicked shut behind me, though I had never heard it open. For 1 second I realized I was completely alone with something I did not understand, and it felt like someone was watching from every dark window at once. "What wants us here?" I whispered. The clerk looked at the floor. "I don't know." "You don't know?" I stopped asking after the first 10 years. The lights flickered once. The clerk went rigid. From somewhere behind the shelves, there came a soft sound. A bell. Not the front door bell. A different bell, like an old service bell on a counter. Ding. The clerk's face collapsed into pure fear. "You have to hide," he whispered. "What? Now?" He shoved me toward the narrow hallway behind the counter. I stumbled through a door into a storage room stacked with dusty boxes. He followed, closed the door almost all the way, then put one finger to his lips. Through the crack, I could see the store. The front door opened. No jingle. Just opened. A man walked in. At first, I thought it was another customer. He wore a brown delivery uniform, old-fashioned, with a cap pulled low. His boots left no sound on the tile. He stopped in front of the counter. The clerk stood frozen. The man turned his head slightly. His face was wrong. Not monstrous. That would have been easier. It was worse because it was almost normal. Smooth. Calm. Empty. Like someone had copied the idea of a person but forgotten the small things. The man spoke in my voice. "Pump 2." I covered my mouth with both hands. The clerk didn't move. The man looked toward the storage room. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my hands trembling, as I stepped backward into the dark shelves. Every second felt stretched, like time itself was conspiring against me. Then the clerk did something I didn't expect. He started laughing. It was fake and shaky, but it pulled the man's attention back. "Long night," the clerk said. The man stared at him. Then slowly he smiled. That smile did something to the room. The air seemed to thin. The lights went out. I heard the clerk whisper, "Run." I didn't think. I shoved through the back door and burst into the cold behind the station. There was no back lot. There should have been dumpsters, maybe a dirt road, maybe propane tanks. Instead, There was open desert stretching forever under a black sky. Behind me, inside the store, something slammed hard against the wall. I ran. Sand dragged at my shoes. My breath tore in and out. The gas station lights stayed behind me, but never got smaller. No matter how far I ran, they remained the same distance away, buzzing in the dark. Then I saw my van. Not by the pumps. Ahead of me, sitting in the desert with the driver's door open. I stopped so abruptly I almost fell. My keys were still in my pocket. I could feel them. The van's interior light glowed, and in the driver's seat sat the clerk. Not the old clerk, the young man from the photograph. Thomas. He looked at me with tears running down his face. "Please," he said, "tell Marlene I tried." Then he vanished. The station lights went out behind me. For the first time all night, the sky changed. A thin gray line appeared at the edge of the horizon. Dawn. I ran to the van, threw myself inside, and started the engine. The GPS blinked back on like nothing had happened. Proceed to route. I didn't care where it took me. I drove. This time, the road did not bring me back. By sunrise, I reached a highway patrol station outside Belen. I must have looked insane. Dusty, shaking, eyes bloodshot, still wearing my delivery badge. I told them I got lost. I told them my phone died. I told them enough to sound scared, but not enough to get myself locked in a hospital. A trooper drove back with me later that morning. The gas station was gone. Not closed. Gone. There was just a patch of cracked concrete beside an empty road, half buried in sand. No pumps. No building. No sign. The trooper said there used to be an old service station out there decades ago. Burned down sometime in the late 80s. He didn't know much else. I quit that job 2 days later. For months, I searched missing person records. I found him eventually. Thomas Bell, freight driver. Disappeared in November 1986. Last known route between Arizona and New Mexico. Wife Marlene. Son Jesse. I never contacted them. What would I even say? Your husband was still working the counter at a gas station that doesn't exist? I tried to move on. I really did. I changed jobs. Stopped driving at night. Moved closer to my sister in Rio Rancho. For a while, I convinced myself exhaustion had done something to my head. A breakdown. A hallucination. Some desert panic episode. Then last year, I was cleaning out the glove box of my old van before selling it. Behind the manual, I found a receipt. $40 on pump 2. No station name. No address. Just a timestamp. 2 a.m. And at the bottom, printed in faded black ink, was one sentence. Don't drive west. I still don't know why it let me leave. Maybe Thomas traded places with me. Maybe he had been waiting all those years for one chance to run. Or maybe that place only keeps you until someone else ignores the warning. I don't drive after midnight anymore. I don't take desert roads. And if I ever see a lonely gas station glowing in the dark, I keep going until my hands hurt from gripping the wheel. But sometimes, when I'm half asleep, I hear that fluorescent buzzing again. And I see Thomas behind the counter, older now, scared out of his mind, watching headlights pull in from the road. Only this time, he isn't looking at a stranger. He's looking at me.